agreed to participate knows of our time limitations. But we told David Evans that we would give him a little bit more time because he was going to be presenting in large measure the survey that the San Antonio Bar Association had done. So with that backdrop, let me turn this over to David Evans. Mr. Evans?
Yeah, just a second, Chairman. They're still moving over from the waiting room. Just 1 minute.
All right.
Let's see. Takes just a second. Okay, Chairman, if you want to make that introduction again.
Okay. Mr. Evans, are you with us?
I sure am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you well. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I want to begin by acknowledging the fact that we're on a pretty short time period here within which to work, but we did think it was important to accord you a little bit more time, given the fact that you're going to be presenting this survey. And I will compliment you on the survey. It was very thorough and obviously very well thought out, even though there were only 7 questions, which I thought was the right way to conduct a survey if you're going to try to get a good response. I noted that there were 451 responses. And how many survey questions were sent out? In other words, how many people received the surveys and what percentage actually responded? Because 451 seems like a large number to respond.
Right. So we had, my understanding is 451 members participated. So that's 451 unique members out of a roughly speaking 2,500, 2,600-ish possible respondents. Now, of course, we might not have current email addresses for all of those persons. So, but it's a fairly good number, a huge, actually a good participation rate. I mean, you consider that some presidential polling will consider it to be statistically significant to have 1,000 people in a given state answer. So we had half that many for 2,500 people.
And was the survey sent only to members of the San Antonio Bar Association?
Yes, sir. At least, yes, that would have been the way that it would have been disseminated. Now, I don't think, and we could certainly supplement our report to answer this question, but I don't believe that anything would have prevented somebody with a web link from being able to take the survey. But my sense of the situation is that it certainly went out to members of the association.
Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt. So I'm going to turn it back over to you and let you proceed with your presentation.
Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman Beck and esteemed members of the commission and the members of the public that have shown up today to participate in this very important hearing. I'm David Evans, president of the San Antonio Bar Association, and I want to thank you for choosing San Antonio as a public hearing city. I'm very proud to contribute to this dialogue. The San Antonio Bar Association has proudly served as the voice for the San Antonio legal community since 1898, so over 100 years. Our heritage began at a time that county judges still traveled by horse throughout Bexar and surrounding counties. Today, over 2 million residents are served by an attorney population of just shy of 7,000 members of the state bar. While San Antonio Bar Association functions as the primary metropolitan bar in our area, we also have 11 affinity bars that provide additional opportunities for fellowship and engagement. The San Antonio Bar Association conducted a 7-question survey and 451 members participated. And we cannot thank those members enough for taking the time to complete the survey, especially given their own input in the open sections where they could give their comments. The detailed report is going to be submitted or has already been submitted to the commission, but I want to share some of the highlights now. First, though, I'd like to give a huge thank you to our executive director, June Moynihan, and the entire Bar Association staff for creating, circulating, and compiling this report in such short order. They really deserve a round of applause for their work on this. So the first 2 questions about whether there needed to be a change and the qualifications of judges generally, nearly 90% of respondents believe that the minimum qualification for judges should be raised. The majority favored raising the minimum number of years of law practice. the majority answered that it was a good idea or worth exploring to require a minimum level of experience in particular practice areas, especially trial experience. Now, it's worth noting that an equal majority did not favor board certification as a minimum requirement. As to the third question in our survey, that it asked about sentiment toward elections versus appointments. Only 10% thought partisan elections of judges is the best method. The majority favored nonpartisan elections. 2/3 of respondents favored or answered that it was worth investigating an appointment process to become a judge. Question 4 asked, if judges were to be appointed, who should make the appointments? If a selection committee or appointment to the bench becomes the new process, respondents were strongly opposed to any process that even had a hint of partisan influence and did not favor direct appointments by elected officials. There was support for a bipartisan judicial qualification committee concept. However, there were many reservations about how the committee would function, how the committee members would be selected, and if in reality it could function in a truly nonpartisan fashion. As to question 5, which dealt with how sitting judges should retain their seats, most respondents favored that sitting judges be held accountable to voters through elections. Again, partisan elections were not favored, but there was slightly more support for retention elections versus nonpartisan elections. Question 6 addressed ideas to increase confidence in the impartiality of the bench. The majority believed that some campaign funding reform needs to happen, and many in the free response portion suggested that law firms and attorneys should not be allowed to donate to judges, especially those they appeared before. The majority of respondents did not favor state-sponsored elections. More than half of the respondents felt it was worth exploring or favored with reservation increasing judge compensation to match private practice compensation. However, 25% of the members did not favor this idea. And the last and 7th question in the survey addressed the ideal term lengths for judges. The majority answered that terms of 4 to 5 years or 6 to 7 years were ideal. There was more support for extended terms of 8 to 9 years and 10 or more years for the appellate courts and senior courts, but not by a majority. 30% of respondents provided free response answers, which are provided in full in the report. Again, thank you for inviting the San Antonio Bar Association to present here this afternoon, and we look forward to reading the Commission's report in December. That completes my report, and I'm available to answer any questions if you have them.
Mr. Chairman? You're muted.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Evans, what does the San Antonio Bar Association intend to do with this survey report?
Well, certainly we'll publish it to our members and give them multiple opportunities to access the information and look at it for themselves. It was taken anonymously, but I felt as though the information that was contained in the open sections where attorneys were able to discuss or type out their comments and thoughts were a wealth of information that certainly should be considered by the commission, as well as considered locally by the bar membership to get a sense of where the membership is on this issue and what additional steps may be taken by them either individually or in the groups that they're members of to petition the commission and the relevant decision makers about where we should go from here. Obviously, we're glad to share that report with you. And if there were any other additional information that you would want, we would be pleased to submit it to our membership and allow them to participate.
Well, I guess the reason I asked is because you hit in your survey a lot of the issues we currently have before the commission. And let me just talk a little bit about the impartiality of the bench. I mean, we've heard some others, their concern about, lawyers, for example, contributing to judges who they appear before. We've had lawyers complain about the fact that they don't like being asked for money by plaintiffs, defendants, Democrats, Republicans, and so on. But then you have judges who say, well, they need to get the word out about their campaigns. And the only way they can do that is if they hit one of the major constituencies that appear before them, which are the lawyers. And so I know in your report, you talk about how trying to somehow increase judicial compensation to closely match that in private practice. We've got members of the legislature on this commission. I personally don't see that happening. I just don't think the money's there to do that. So, and the reason I was asking is whether there's going to be any follow-up by the San Antonio Bar Association to somehow deal with some of the issues that have already been identified.
Absolutely. Well, I think we can certainly speak with Ms. Moynihan. You know, I don't want to volunteer. I already volunteer enough for things, initiatives, great ideas, and why don't you go implement them, right? So I'm careful not to overstay my welcome in that regard. However, I certainly think that we can follow up, and that this might be the first of several stages of asking questions of our membership. I certainly subscribe to the notion that the collective wisdom of many is much better than the, even the considered deliberate attention of one or two people, right? And I certainly think within, in the Bexar County community, I can say that that is the issue of contributions and so forth is something that I've heard mention of, and it appears in the survey. One of the ways in which Bexar County is unique, and I think Travis County is the only other county out of the 254 in the state of Texas, is that we have a presiding system, which, to the extent, if that was a concern of a given practitioner about whom I appearing in front of, the presiding system that we use in Bexar County, which has been around for decades, really, I think, ameliorates those concerns to a great degree. So perhaps that might be one way of addressing those issues, where by and large, if more counties were to consider going to that presiding system, that might avoid that issue. I certainly think that we're blessed with a number of fantastic judges now working in Bexar County, both at the appellate and the local district and criminal courts. The way that they have come together recently with respect to everything that we've been doing in COVID has been just absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's absolutely amazing to me. And to use the presiding system essentially, and to take the presiding system virtual, to see that work out, and the district courts and the county courts and all the courts coming together to make that work out, I think definitely counsels for a pay raise, at least, because they've been in the trenches working through these things. I think the judges were busy before. They're even busier now, given how easy, relatively speaking, it is to get a hearing. But to your question, I would be glad to speak with June and the executive board, and of course the board of the San Antonio Bar Association, to follow up with any additional questions you may have. As you can see, having 451 responses, members that were responding, shows that this issue is of a special concern to them, and that they have plenty of ideas.
Yeah, I want to say, just so the other members of the commission know, I've tried cases under your system in San Antonio, and you never know who your trial judge is until the day you're going to trial. So if you give a contribution to one judge, you may never get that judge when you actually go to trial. So I understand the point you're making. So other members of the commission, any questions of Mr. Evans?
I've got one.
David,
All right.
Chip Babcock.
David Evans, thank you so much for appearing and for all the work you did. A number of your respondents said that perhaps there should be campaign finance reform, and maybe lawyers should be barred, lawyers and law firms should be barred from contributing to judicial campaigns. The U.S. Supreme Court has decided a number of cases in the campaign finance area under the First Amendment. Has any analysis been done by your bar association that you know of regarding the constitutionality of telling the lawyers and the law firms they can't contribute, which, by the way, I think the lawyers and law firms might welcome. But has anybody looked at that?
No, we haven't. We haven't looked into that issue, and I guess it would come down to, if the commission was even interested in seriously considering that as an option, then I'm sure we could, we would participate in any way that we can. I mean, there's obviously a delicate line that's walked in such a situation where you're talking about whether and to what extent people can use their money as part of speech, or to petition their government in the form they did. So it's obviously a constitutional concern. I think if nothing else, right, then the way you counter that is insisting on the fact that there be complete transparency in terms of who is participating, what money they're giving, and when that money was given.
Right. One follow-up question, if I may, and thank you for that answer. One of your respondents said that you're assuming facts not in evidence when you said and I don't think you said this, but that confidence in the impartiality of the bench is impacted by the amount or source of money. I don't think that was your question that was asked in question 6, but is there any evidence that the public has lost confidence in the judiciary in Bexar County or elsewhere because of the funding of judicial campaigns by lawyers and law firms?
I can't say that that's so. And, certainly I'm sure that it happens from time to time where litigants and even their lawyers will give into that sort of cynicism, right? When they get an adverse result that they didn't agree with, or that their client didn't agree with, especially if they spent a lot of money to get to that bad result, then they want to blame somebody, perhaps other than their lawyer or their case, or sometimes their litigant. Many instances, the situation is one in which you just can't file a motion to change the facts, and it is what it is, and the law once applied to those facts counsel for a concern or counsel for a given result. But in our situation, given the fact that the fourth court actually sits in San Antonio, if you have a problem with that district judge and the decision that he or she gave you, then you have relief to the fourth court almost immediately if you want it, depending on the circumstances. So I think that perhaps what we need to do is counsel and really try to increase decrease the level of cynicism within the bar about those things. I mean, I've certainly never felt that way. I've never felt as though the results that I got were a result of, whether and to what extent I gave to a given judge, or to what extent my opposing counsel gave to that judge. I look in the mirror on those things as to what I could have done differently. And I think all of us, to a certain extent, have probably had the conversation with clients where we said, look, I can't guarantee you a result, but I can try as much as possible to eliminate surprises. In other words, we're not going to walk out of court with our hat handed to us and say, well, I never saw that coming, right? Instead, I just try to get my clients ready for the full panoply of things that could happen and prepare them for that fact, try to give them the chances of the prediction of what it might happen, and then go from there. But I certainly wouldn't walk out of the courtroom and saying, oh, well, that judge has it in for me, or in for you, or just doesn't like you. I don't think that at all helps to maintain the rule of law.
Sure. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I think Representative Menjimenez had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a point of clarification in regards to the presiding court system, the presiding judge that's used in Bexar County. That's for the civil side. That is not used in the criminal side, in the criminal district courts.
I'm so sorry. You're absolutely right, Representative Menjimenez. Yes.
Okay, any other questions of Mr. Evans?
Yes, Chairman. David, looking at question 4 and 5 was interesting to me. And I wondered if you could speak to what you were able to extrapolate from question 4, if judges are appointed, who should make the appointment? And I notice it's a high percentage that seems to disfavor the governor making the appointment, but conversely, the more favorable or highly favored seems to be appointed by bipartisan judicial qualification committee. So could you share with us a little bit more insight on that? Because as you know, most appointments are made by the governor. But it seems from your finding that they do not favor that overwhelmingly. Right.
And I think that, in particular, of course, in Bexar County is primarily a Democrat party county, as are a number of the larger population centers in the state of Texas. And so I don't know to what extent, because I'm not involved in those kinds of discussions, never have been, in terms of how people are vetted to the governor, and I don't know. I can't even remember the last time we had a governor appoint a judge. But at any rate, I think that what people would like is local control and local say over people that are going to make local decisions. And the extent to which the governor makes those decisions, who's not doesn't live in the area and doesn't know the people, then one wonders to what extent does the governor have a full idea, perspective of exactly what is going on in that particular area. So in of and by the people to a certain extent is a local concern. And for that reason, I think certainly within our membership, when you look at those comments, and I really commend to you to the commission to look through those comments, to look at them very closely. There are a number of good points that are being made. And I think that the idea of a bipartisan judicial selection committee would be the idea that you would get those members of the bar who roundly enjoy support for just being fantastic lawyers, as is the case with our judges. I think a consistent refrain when you talk to anybody in the San Antonio bar about this issue is that they don't care if the person's a Democrat, they don't care if they're a Republican. What they care about is that they're good judges. And when we have done survey or poll results in years past, normally I think it was the Criminal Defense Lawyer Association would do it for all of the judges, civil or criminal, in the Bexar County. You go down the poll and it would be Republican, Democrat, Republican, Republican, Democrat. I mean, in no certain order. In other words, it wasn't like all the best judges were of a particular party. And so that being said, I think that we can certainly put our heads together, collective heads together in the San Antonio area, Bexar County, to come up with a group of people who would call it like they see it and be scrupulously honest about who they believe deserves to have such a bench, such that a slate of candidates for the governor's consideration could be given. There again, as mentioned in the report, there was certain concern about the extent to which, even notwithstanding the bipartisan nature of such a committee, that partisan concerns would still show themselves into it. But again, I think there are other structural safeguards that can be instituted to prevent things like that from happening. And in San Antonio, both I think in the district courts, county courts, and just every court that we have, federal courts included, we're just blessed with a lot of good judges, none of whom I think the average practitioner is worried about being in front of because of some vendetta or some cynical notion that they're not going to be treated, or that their client is not going to be treated fairly. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's the way I'm seeing it.
Well, it's a very comprehensive survey that you've done with the 137 questions. I commend them for not having voter fatigue going through this process. But when I look at that, nearly 70% saying they would not like to have the governor select, I don't see that as they would not like to have a Republican governor or a Democrat governor appoint. I just see it as they would not like to have a governor appoint, period. The last question I had was really question 5. Just needed to make sure I understood. They must win a partisan election. Overwhelmingly, people are saying they do not favor this, and this is as it relates to a judge who has been appointed, but then how they should retain their seat is decided, I suppose, in the next election, which hasn't fared very well, whether you are a Democrat governor appointing a judge or a Republican governor appointing a judge. The results in their next election don't seem to favor those being reelected.
Right. Well, and I can tell you that in my own experience, I can remember or recall that under the docket equalization order for the appellate courts, there was a case that I was involved in for a number of years that went out to El Paso during the course of because the fourth court, the way that they just sent a slate of cases out to El Paso, including our case. And El Paso has 3 appellate judges, and I think they had a retirement or something had happened. But suffice it to say that under that particular system, the governor appointed a person who was a Republican to that bench, and he served for a period of time. But then in the next election, he lost his seat, and so then somebody else was put in, and then I think that person maybe retired or something, and then the same person. I mean, I don't remember the exact nature of it, but it was a situation where, tactically speaking, it wasn't going to be the case that this Republican judge in El Paso County was going to get had a high likelihood of being retained. And so in that consequence, you had this lack of continuity because that person came in, did as much work as he could do in the period of time that he had, but then he was out in the next election. And I think that already took a very busy court and further compromised its ability to attend to its docket. One wonders if, in fact, if it had been a situation where the slate of candidates that could have filled that appointed seat would have come from the governor, or would have come from a local group of people, bipartisan committee, would that have led to a different result such that they would have chosen somebody who stood a better chance perhaps of meeting the electors? But it absolutely is correct, Representative Sherman, that when you look at these results, they definitely think that at the end of the day, the voter should make the decision about what should happen. And I think that's exactly right. I think the same way that we celebrate the jury system, I think we should absolutely and always celebrate the voting system that we have and do everything we can to protect it.
And I think
Thank you,
Judge Jameson had a question.
Sure. I want to thank you again, Mr. Evans, and the San Antonio Bar and your staff for putting this together. And I assume on fairly short notice, maybe after you found out about today's meeting. One of the, and also all of these great comments, this day and age, I don't really like to read comments of almost anything because they don't always advance a point and are just, and can be rather abusive. However, these are very, very thoughtful and very, very helpful and very germane to the topics that we have been discussing. One of the comments said it would be nice to have a survey of the public. And I will have to say, I wish that's something that we had the time and the money to accomplish, because obviously lawyers are attuned in a certain way. We don't really know, as well as the information you've presented today, what the public would think. And your executive director can breathe a sigh of relief, because I'm not going to suggest that she help put this out to the general population of Bexar County. But thanks a lot. And like I say, this is great food for all of us on the commission, because it's very germane.
All right, any questions by any other members of the committee?
I do.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
Senator.
I guess one of the points I'd like to make is that, quite frankly, on the appointment system, it really, if it's a Republican governor, the Republican governor will appoint Republican judges. If it's a Democrat governor will appoint Democrat judges. The last judge that I know, the last governor that I know that appointed someone from the opposite party was Governor Clemens, way back in the 80s. And the reality is, just from the comments I've been reading on this survey, which by the way, are very, very informative, and that is that if you look what's happened in the federal system, the appointment process, quite frankly, has also become very partisan. And that's an issue, I think, why most attorneys and judges probably don't like the appointment process by itself, without some type of check and balance in trying to come up with a system that allows government to do that, but provides at least some kind of a check and balance, if you will, on that appointment process. Because I see it's been abused on the federal level very much, as all of us can see. But that's the only comment I wanted to make on that.
Thank you, Senators. Any other questions by any members of the commission? All right, Mr. Evans, thank you very, very much. You provided a lot of food for thought to our commission, and I really want to thank you and the members of the San Antonio Bar Association for undertaking this task. It's been very, very helpful, and thank you very much for appearing today.
Again, thank you all so much for even taking the interest in this and doing all this hard work to consider this question. I know this is something that's been going back to, I remember years ago when Wallace Jefferson was talking with us about it. So when he was still just, I think, fresh on the court, Texas Supreme Court, looking at this issue. So I'm glad to see that you're still taking it into consideration.
Okay, thank you. I guess our next speaker is Judge Alvarez.
It's Judge Mary Lou Alvarez. We have two.
Okay. Judge Alvarez, are you on?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you very much. And thank you for having this, this session. Good afternoon, everyone. I have my timer, so I'll be timing myself in 5 minutes. So, and I tend to speak quickly, so I will be making a conscious effort to slow down. I hope sincerely that I don't bore y'all, but thank you very much for having me. My name is Mary Lou Alvarez. I am a civil district court judge in Bexar County. I am new to my judicial career. I was elected in 2008 and I began my service on January 1st, 2019. I want to give you a little bit about my background. I have a bachelor's of science in industrial engineering and engineering management from Stanford University. I obtained my Juris Doctorate from Seton Hall in Newark, New Jersey, after working for 2 years in operations management for Honeywell in Phoenix, Arizona. I began my trial court experience before I finished law school with year-long internships serving in the federal courthouse in Newark with then Judge, now Justice Joseph Greenaway, and also serving a year internship with the federal prosecutor, then U.S. Attorney Christie. I also completed my 3rd year in law school as a state clinic for representing juveniles and criminal defense matters at the state courthouse for Essex County. So I say that to let you know, and then during the summers, I did summer clerkships at both private law firms and nonprofit law firms, all with an eye towards developing my skill set as a trial lawyer and developing expertise in the courtroom. I began my legal career with a federal clerkship, serving for 2 years at the federal courthouse in the Eastern District of Texas in Beaumont with the Honorable Ronald H. Clark. He is a trusted mentor and friend, and I was very honored to have him speak at my investiture on January 1st, 2019. As you can see, I have had an eye towards the courtroom since I started law school. The trial court is my passion. I think that is where our people, our folks, our corporations, our children go to get justice. That is where we begin the process. That's the strongest foundation that our judicial institution holds, is at the trial court level. And I have worked to make sure that I am both qualified and credentialed before I began my race to become a judge. So I give you my background. I forgot to mention I had a 15-year litigation career, all at the trial court level, before I took the bench. And I give you my background, I give you my passion to help dissuade any discussions that there is a perceived lack of qualification or credentials with our current judiciary. And I hope that my personal credentials and qualifications will serve as an exhibit against that perception. During my young judicial career, I have served as the co-chair for the Judicial Committee of the Collaborative Commission on Domestic Violence, which began under the leadership of Judge Diaz and Judge Sakai. I've served as a member, I still am a member of the Virtual Jury Trial Committee. I am a member of the Jury Oversight Committee, which, as Mr. Evans mentioned, in the times of COVID have become critical and meeting around the clock, on call, if you will, so we can make sure that our courthouse doors are open, even if they're open virtually. I also serve on the juvenile board. I have taken it upon our court to host quarterly lunch and learn seminars to educate not just our attorneys, but the public on domestic violence issues as it relates to litigation at the trial court civil level. I've also spoken at PTAs, local colleges, community organizations. I've spoken at career days and plan to continue to do so. And now with Zoom, I will be talking with students in Oakland, California, because of my friendships developed in undergrad, as well as Boy Scouts in Dallas because of where I began my litigation career after my clerkship. So the presentations that I continue to do and the presentations that I do to the community, I also mirror those presentations to our professional organizations for the San Antonio Bar Association, the Bexar County Women's Bar Association, the San Antonio Young Lawyers Association, and the San Antonio Family Law Bar Association locally. So I speak to let you know our current system of judicial selection works just fine. Our state bench is not a lifetime appointment bench. It is a term bench, and those of us who run for office, who choose to marshal our time, talents, and passions to serve our community in this way, we know that. And I think the public, as well as our litigants and our institution itself, is served by taking away this notion that we are entitled to serve for as long as we would like. We are entitled to serve at the bench and fulfill our duties to the institution and to the public for as long as our voters will have us. And that is a strength, and it is a strength that I hope this commission takes seriously and sincerely before trying to marshal any proposition that would take that right, that voting right, away from the public. I had some prepared remarks regarding the education of our electorate, regarding our judges, but my time is run. My timer went off. So I will continue, or I will entertain questions. I know we have a whole host of folks from Bexar County who would like to address y'all, so I don't want to step on their toes.
Judge, this is David Beck. First of all, let me say you've got very impressive credentials. No one's going to question your credentials. The question I have, though, is the issue, one of the issues we're having to deal with, and that's funding. Because when you run for office, you have to get your name out there. And do you have any thoughts about what, if anything, we should do to somehow improve the way we fund, the way we select judges in Texas?
Well, I can tell you, going through the process, and I'm not a legacy candidate. This was my first run for office. My family had never, my family had always voted, but there was never any run for office before, not just with my immediate family, but my extended family. So I kind of went in a little blind, and I'm grateful to our community and to our local elected officials who kind of guided me and took me under their wing. I will tell you, I would love to not have to raise funds to get the message out, but I think public funding of judicial races is an expensive endeavor, just as I think nonpartisan races of judicial candidates is an expensive endeavor. But I can tell you, during my race, especially before I won the election, I didn't have a lot of funding. And I spent a lot of time going door to door. I spent a lot of time using social media. I spent a lot of time of my own. You don't have money, you use time and brain power and passion to get the message out, and it's possible. But I agree it's a problem. I don't think you're going to find anyone that disagrees with the notion that financing of campaigns is a little outrageous. But I think everybody just wants to make sure that our electorate is educated. And so when we think about campaign finance reform, there's got to be the corollary conversation about, well, if we don't educate the public this way, how then will we do it?
Thank you, Judge. Any questions by any members of the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Tom Phillips here.
Judge Phillips.
Judge, I would invite you to extend your time by 45 seconds and tell us your notions on how the electorate could be better educated, which you said you had some thoughts on, particularly in the context of a large urban county like Bexar or some of our other large counties in Texas.
Thank you, Justice. My thoughts are that in the public service off the bench that a lot of the current judiciary are engaged in, the town halls, the conversations around social issues like domestic violence, the career day, the law day, the PTA meetings, that is education. I think speaking to, and I've taken an interest because a friend of mine who is the parent of one of my, who is a parent, and we went to the same preschool for our kids. He's a professor of political science at Texas A&M here in San Antonio. I go to his classes and began education there as well. Education in my churches, education at every extracurricular activity that my children go to. Those have become my social life. And so I think the opportunity for education, not with social media, but also with the interaction that we as elected officials and as judges have in our daily endeavors, it is working. I think the public, especially here in San Antonio and Bexar County, we are seeing a greater awareness of what happens at our courthouses. They're not just two buildings off in the corner on De La Rosa or Nueva and Dwyer. They are where family members go to seek justice. And I think just the conversation, that in and of itself educates the public.
Thank you, Judge. Any other questions by members of the commission?
Chairman Beck, thank you.
Yes,
Judge
Representative
Alvarez,
Sherman?
thank you. Judge Alvarez, thank you so much for taking the time to educate our electorate. So many folks who are candidates don't take that time, so really appreciate the sweat equity that you put into this process in informing our citizens.
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate you.
Thank you again on behalf of the commission, Judge. We really appreciate you taking your time and sharing your thoughts. It's been very, very helpful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Judge Nelson Wolf. Judge, are you on?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Good, good. Well, thank you very much for asking me to say a few words about.
Judge, could you turn it up a little bit more where it's a little bit low?
All right, we will. We sure will. We'll do that right now. Okay. Can you hear all right now?
Yes, I hear better now. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, thank you for asking me to say a few words. You know, I served in both the Texas House and the Texas Senate, so I know the difficulties you have with respect to a number of issues, and I know the judicial races is a very tough one. All I can tell you a couple of thoughts. You got the worst system of any state in the nation, other than the other 5 that are just like us. It's kind of like a lottery. You spin the wheel. And if you happen to be on the Democratic ticket in the right time, in the right election, you will win, and vice versa on the Republican. It switches back and forth. 20 years, almost 20 years, I've served as county judge. I've seen many, many good judges lose because they happen to be in the wrong election cycle. And to me, it's just a gamble of who you're going to get, because they go in there and they either vote Democrat or they vote Republican. You made a good step forward. Was it 4 years ago when you did say you have to vote on a candidate rather than a straight party? We'll see if that has any effect. But I would say the odds are that if whatever party turns out the biggest vote is the person on that ticket is probably going to win. So I think it's by far the worst system. I think there's two legitimate choices I believe you have. One of them, I'm not opposed to a merit system, not opposed to a nonpartisan committee selecting judicial candidates and to the governor appointing them off of a list of qualified people selected by a nonpartisan commission. Governor picks them. I've seen Governor Abbott, and I saw him just pick one the other day, that Judge Skinner, who happens to be a very, very good judge. So I'm not afraid of other party picking it as long as there's a good vetting process. Second, other choice I think would be good would be a nonpartisan election. Could be held in the off election November years. I believe then a candidate has the opportunity to present themselves without a party label, and I think people would pay more attention to who they're voting on rather than just voting on somebody that's a Democrat or somebody that's Republican. We do not face in Texas the issues that the United States Supreme Court has, where there's just such a tremendous rub over who ought to be there. We've got great competent judges, both Republicans and Democrats, but they get washed away in the wrong year. So that would be my take on it. I'm particularly more concerned with the criminal justice system than I am the civil section. I think I have 40 judges in the courthouse that we try to keep happy with the right resources for their courts. But it's the criminal justice system that, to me, it really has a negative impact when you don't know who you're going to get in there. All their campaigns are funded by the bail bond industry, which I think is out of control in Texas, funded by defense lawyers in a quagmire of partisan politics. So that would be my view.
Thank you, Judge, very much. I believe Representative Menjimenez had a question.
Judge Wolf, it's good to see you. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. I had a question regarding, we as a commission have been There's been a number of proposals that have been put in front of us, an appointment system, nonpartisan elections. And one of the concerns that I have is that just if for some reason we do change, the legislature changes how judges are selected. I think one proposal suggested that all judges would have to start from scratch. They wouldn't be grandfathered in, despite being elected or their years of service. It would be a completely clean slate. What do you think about if there is a proposal that maybe there is a selection process that's adopted? Do you think the judges that are currently in office should be grandfathered in, or should it be a
Personally,
completely?
haven't really thought about that too much. I think in a partisan election, that may not be all that bad. They do have a limited term. I mean, not limited terms, but they are only there for 4 years. Haven't really thought that one out very well. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it. At least gives you a transition to whatever new system you come up with.
All right, any other questions by members of the commission? If not, Judge, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for taking your time to
Enjoyed it.
appear before us. Very helpful.
At least they know.
Okay, next, Mr. Damon Garza. Mr. Garza?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman, and the rest of the commission for inviting me to be here today. I am speaking today on behalf of the San Antonio Trial Lawyers Association as the current president of that entity. And I am here on behalf of SATLA, which is an organization that has more than 400 members amongst its group that primarily reside in and around the San Antonio area, although we do have members that stretch the wide expanse of the state of Texas. I am here because our mission as an organization is to make sure that we preserve access to the courts primarily, but we also focus on informing our community about threats to the justice system, as well as responding to anything that we believe would threaten the Seventh Amendment right. And as an organization, we believe that removing the ability of the populace to vote in judges, as we currently are able to do, would be an attack on that system, or at least an attack on the right of the people to have a voice in that system. We believe that under the current amount of information that's been provided, which I believe is limited at this point, that the potential for partisanship in a process that would deal with judicial appointments is too great. And at the end of the day, dealing with clients, because as some of you may know, the San Antonio Trial Lawyers Association consists primarily of lawyers who mostly practice in the civil arena and who mostly represent individuals. And the membership repeatedly talk about how important our clients feel it is for them to have a voice. And we believe that anything that would infringe upon their constitutional right to participate in that process would be antithetical to our democracy.
Mr. Garza, let me ask a question. Would your organization be in favor of partisan elections, nonpartisan elections, or either?
Judge, at this point, I believe that there is a tendency to lean towards nonpartisan elections. Obviously, that has been decided for us recently, and we, as Judge Wolf intimated, we are still waiting to see how that's going to play out in the next round of elections, whether it will hopefully curb the effect that Judge Wolf mentioned earlier about there being sweeps for one side or the other, which could catch up very good jurists that have experience and that we enjoy practicing in front of. So at this point in time, I believe that the support is to go with the current system of the nonpartisan elections and wait to see how that plays out before taking a firm position either way.
Okay, there may be other members of the commission that have questions. Any other members of the commission? Judge Jameson.
Always. I think you're talking about no straight ticket voting is the change. There's no
Yes.
change from partisan elections, right?
Yes, Judge, I'm sorry. Yeah, and to be clear, that's what I was referring to, the removal of the ability to vote straight ticket. The idea was to wait to see how that plays out, to see if it sort of minimizes or mitigates this phenomenon of these sweeps, depending on which way the wind happens to be blowing that election, but with an eye towards possibly nonpartisan elections in the future, yes.
What are your thoughts about campaign contributions by lawyers who appear before the judges?
Well, Judge, as Mr. Evans, the president of the San Antonio Bar Association, mentioned earlier, our system is like that in Travis County, which may be unique only at this point in time to our two counties, in that we have this presiding docket where the judges are not appointed until about 3 to 4 days prior to trial. And given the number of benches that we have here in Bexar County, the odds of you trying to tip the scales by making a donation in advance of that time period and then hoping that you happen to draw that particular judge, I think minimize the effect of that and help to prevent that, to the extent that there should, the question is whether there should be donations at all by lawyers or law firms. I haven't actually posed that to our membership, and it's not something that we've studied, but just my personal thoughts off the top of my head when I heard that today is that if you remove the ability of lawyers and law firms to donate to these campaigns, the question or concern that I might have, and I'm not sure exactly how you would study this, but the real concern would be then what do you do about the donations from corporations that tend to be in front of the judges more regularly than an individual? As a personal injury lawyer, my clients will hopefully only ever have one case because hopefully they'll only ever be injured once. Whereas a large employer or company or insurance company who appears in these courts, hundreds of times a year, only being the entities that might be donating to these campaigns, while the individuals who appear in front of these campaigns, in front of these judges as lawyers or their firms being precluded from that process, potentially opens the door for there to be an imbalance in influence. Now, hopefully that's not the case. And as was mentioned, it's not something that you hear about often, if ever, as Mr. Evans stated, that anybody feels that they've been jilted or misled by the sitting judge because of some sort of financial influence. But I could see the potential for that. So that's just me shooting off the cuff.
Okay, this is
Any
my
other
last.
questions go ahead.
Just one quick one. Have you had any conversations with other groups or members in other states that have the same mission that your group has, protecting the Seventh Amendment? Since Texas is sort of a minority in the way we select judges, have you found that there's good or bad, or do they wish they had what Texas has? Or
I find, unfortunately, that there is no clear answer to that. I feel like my colleagues in other states and jurisdictions who have varied systems like ours have pros and cons. They have complaints just like we do. I mean, you heard Judge Wolf talk about, some of the negative impacts that come from this type of partisan elections. However, you see, the benefit of some candidates who maybe are outside of the political system, who are able to put their name in the hat, so to speak, like Judge Mary Lou Alvarez that you just heard from, and who are able to get their rightfully deserved spot on the bench. So, which would not be necessarily possible if we had a nomination process where, you might not, as a political outsider, have the ability to get one of those nominations.
okay, I don't mean to cut you off, but I've used too much time by asking questions. Thank you so much.
Any other members of the commission have any questions of Mr. Garza? If not, thank you, Mr. Garza, for taking your time to appear before us and sharing your thoughts. We really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the invitation. We appreciate your time.
Okay. Next, Judge Rosie Speedland Gonzalez.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Judge Rosie Spielin Gonzalez. I preside over Bexar County Court at Law number 13 in San Antonio, Texas. It is one of 2 misdemeanor level courts that hear exclusively domestic violence cases. I won't go over my credentials or we'll be here well into the night. May it please the commission, the citizens of Texas and Bexar County. Let me be clear. Texas does not need to change the manner in which judges are elevated to the bench via elections. Should this committee move in a direction away from the current system, then I ask you to consider the following. As Americans, we are taught our entire lives that we have the best form of government in the world because our democracy is one that we, the people, elect. A government by the people, for the people. How better to guarantee judicial accountability than to make judges accountable to voters? The election process is reliable and is fundamental in our democracy. The election process is the only check and balance to counter purely political appointments, whether the appointee is qualified or not. The fact that judges decide cases of great significance and consequence to the general public means that the public must have control over the judiciary. We cannot force on the general public a judicial selection process that impedes important democratic values like judicial independence, democratic legitimacy, and diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity, socioeconomic diversity, professional diversity on the bench. Just over half of our population are people of color, yet 20% of judges are people of color. Just over half of our population are women, yet women make up less than 30% of judges. I am an elected judge. I am a person of color. I am a Mexican American. I am first-generation American on my father's side and multi-generational proud Tejana on my mother's side. I am a woman. I am an out lesbian. And I am a wife. And I was elected taking, listen to this, 0 political financial contributions. I was elected taking only a handful of in-kind contributions from supporters that believed in me and hosted meet and greet parties and text parties for me. The court system belongs to the people, not the legislature, not the governor, not even the judiciary. The way we select judges has a profound impact on the kinds of courts, kinds of judges, and ultimately the kind of justice we have in Texas. Elected judges show respect to the public and have to earn the public's trust. Elected judges must get out amongst our fellow residents, voters, and citizens, the very people we sit in judgment over and seek to sit in judgment over. The electorate should be the body that has the opportunity to examine candidates' backgrounds and experience and make an informed decision. Electing judges is the only way to truly assure judicial independence, a hallmark of the rule of law. Elected judges serve the public. Appointed judges serve politicians and affluent bar members and the power players who had a hand in their selection. Being elected requires the public getting to know you. Being appointed just means you knew the right people. Elections, even though highly charged politically, are less political than appointments. With an appointment, there are quote unquote behind the scenes influences. With an appointment, many see it more as an anointment, and anointments are not good for a democratic society. In many states today, judicial selection protocols implemented as opposed to elections for the judiciary are not working. Appointments represent the agenda of the ones making the appointments. Appointments too often become political favors. An appointive's judicial selection process does not provide for any accountability. Appointments often end up going to the person who donated a large amount of money or who has the most political connections. Elections and voting lets the people decide. The fact that past elected judges and justices who lost their seats in free and open elections now want Texas to change the way it picks its judges from free and open elections to judicial appointments only reflects a sudden and convenient sentiment that now questions free and open elections, questions voters' ability to elect the judiciary of their own choosing, and sends a message that we, the voters, don't know what's best for us, and that only a select few should be afforded the privilege to select our judges. Your question, but we have a problem with campaign spending and undue influence. The problem of excessive campaign spending, at the very best, the appearance of a lack of impartiality, can be addressed by setting and imposing limits on how much judicial candidates can accept from contributors, and barring contributions from attorneys to judicial campaigns, and setting and imposing limits on the number of appointments made, and setting and imposing limits on contributions and contributors, because that is what can avoid judges being beholden to appointers and contributors. Judges should reflect the communities they serve. Voters should be given the ultimate decision-making power of who passes judgment on them. And I ask that you let the people decide. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Judge. Any questions by any members of the commission? Yes, Chip Babcock.
Judge Gonzalez, thank you for your remarks. We have heard in past meetings that there is a problem with voter ignorance, especially in the big counties. It sounds like you were on a down ballot race, and yet you raised no money. And I'm wondering how you felt about whether the electorate was informed about your candidacy. How did you get the word out, and how were you successful in winning the election? A down ballot race where you didn't spend any money.
I did it over many years prior to becoming a judge, and prior to going to law school. I spent 11 years in this community in the fields of social work. I did child abuse investigations. I was a probation officer. I worked with gang members on the south side of San Antonio. I worked with the indigent. I taught special ed. So I worked the plethora of that type of career. Then I went to law school at 33 and became a lawyer. And I got to working on the political landscape for Justice Alma Lopez. I got to meet a lot of judges, a lot of people in the community that way. But it was my third time running. And so my name was already out there. I ran in 2010. I ran in 2014. My credentials were out there. And if you ask any one of my counterparts who ran in those cycles with me, there wasn't a night they didn't see me out at a free public event, shaking hands, meeting people, listening to what they cared about, and making sure that they knew I cared about them. That's how I got my electorate educated on what my credentials were. And that's how I got their commitment to vote for me. And let me just let you know that in a cycle where I accepted no political contributions, I beat the incumbent opponent by over 70,000 votes.
Any other members? Chip, you got any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to follow up one, Mr. Chair, if that's all right. Sure. It sounds like you did all the things that we would hope would be done to inform the electorate. Your race aside, is there a problem with the electorate in the down ballot races, which the judges races are usually, not knowing who they're voting for, particularly in big counties?
I don't believe so. I think that's an excuse used by the sore losers on the losing side of the aisle.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions by members of the
Yes.
commission?
Mr. Chairman, Tom
Yes.
Phillips.
Judge Phillips?
Judge, I think I understand your position about an elected judge being the preferable system for having a judge. But you talk a lot, and there's some studies that back this up about judges being more polite, more hardworking, et cetera, when they know they're going to face the voters. And a majority of incumbent judges are still not opposed in Texas, when it used to be overwhelming, 70 or 80% 30 years ago, were not opposed when they were up for re-election. So do you think that the public would get the same benefit? That is, they're able to get a check on every judge. They can throw a judge out, and that the judges would get the benefit of realizing who they're accountable to if judges who had already been elected sought re-election on a retention yes/no ballot?
I think so.
Okay, I appreciate that because there are 3 states that do it that way, and it cuts down on the number of contested races each time the voters have to sift through the merits of the candidate, but it requires every judge to be voted on.
Okay, any other questions by members of the commission? If not, Judge, thank you very much for taking your
Then,
time to
I'll
appear
take a
before us.
question from Ms. Liberato.
Thank you, Judge.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Just one quick question, and thank you, Judge Gonzalez. It is certainly possible to keep election of judges, but make other changes. And some of those types of changes that have been suggested is increasing terms, increasing qualification, having more education of the public. Could you share with us what your thoughts are on whether any of those or other types of changes would be appropriate, assuming that we kept with the election of judges?
I want to be clear that I speak for myself only when I say to all of you, get rid of contributions to judges from lawyers. I feel, and I've always felt, that it was not something that I should be doing as a judicial candidate, which is soliciting for money. Okay, find another way. I personally didn't need any outside money. My wife and I spent a total of $7,000, maybe $8,000 on my campaign and focused on social media events and in-person events. I think that it's up to the commission, and I'm going to rely and defer to my friend and very qualified member of the commission to make recommendations, and that is Representative Ina Minhares. I think there's room for improved qualifications. I think there's room for campaign contribution and spending revamping. I think there's room for making sure that judges don't have to run under a certain political party banner. I think there's rooms for lots of improvement without taking the power of the voter away to select the judges that are on the bench. And I meant it when I said to all of you, had I needed to be appointed, I wouldn't be a judge. I am too out of line with the traditional good old boy system in the state. I am an out gay woman married to a woman. I am a minority. I come from South Texas. I am a product of the public school system. I don't have that generational knowledge of lawyers in my family. I don't have that institutional ability to give to St. Mary's University in the thousands of dollars. All I have is my integrity, my character, and my work ethic. And I'm glad that at least the voters recognize that.
All right, Judge Phillips, you had a question?
Yes. Judge, it's easy to get data on district judges because it's on the Secretary of State website, their electoral history. But I'm curious as to whether you were ever opposed in a primary, or whether all 3, that's my first question, were all 3 of your races you were the nominee of your party without opposition?
I was unopposed in 2010. I was unopposed in 2014. I wasn't going to run in 2018. I refused to throw my hat in the ring until I got about 8 to 10 calls in one night from our precinct chair meeting and our party chair begging me to throw my name in the campaign run. And I did, and I did it unopposed.
Okay, now this leads to my principal question. Do you think that you lost in 2010 and 2014 because of party sweeps, and that you were helped in 2018 by?
I'm not going to blame it on a party sweep. I'm going to blame it on voter apathy. And so I think I lost because of voter apathy, not because of any lack of effort. And if you go and ask Judge Lisa Jarrett what quality of opponent I was to her, she'll tell you. If you go and ask former Judge Crystal Chandler what kind of opponent I was in 2014, I was twice as tough an opponent in 2018, and that's why she's no longer the judge here. But I don't think it had to do with sweeps as much as voter apathy, Justice Phillips.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Judge. We really appreciate you taking your time to share your thoughts with us. And thank you again for your comments. They've been very, very helpful to us.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next speaker is Victor, I guess former District Judge Victor Negron.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members of the commission, for the invitation to speak here. I won't waste any time. I'll jump right into it. My name is Victor Negron. I've been licensed 41 years in Texas. I'm board certified in family law. I'm twice a former district judge, past president of the San Antonio Bar, former captain in the Army JAG Corps, and currently in private practice. I've seen qualified, experienced judges who were held in high regard by the bar lose elections for no other reason than their gender and or ethnicity. I've also seen attorneys elected to the bench who had very little or no experience in the types of matters they would be presiding over. We've all known very good and very bad judges, I hate to say, but some who have abused and mismanaged their power. These things could have been avoided if we had a different system in place. I'm giving testimony urging that the manner in which we choose judges in Texas should be completely changed. My testimony relates primarily to my experience in family and civil law, and here are some of my reasons. Many of those who have chosen to run for a bench and been elected have had very limited legal experience, especially in family law. Family law cases predominate on most, if not all, of our civil district court dockets. Aside from the technical laws and rules that we have to follow, the person who sits on the bench should have such a degree of legal experience and knowledge as would be expected of a person who is making life-changing decisions in the lives of our citizens. They should have practiced actively in the courts of the state and have a very good idea of what to do once they sit on the bench. As Yogi Berra once said, it's like riding a bicycle you never rode. It should not be on the job training. Attorneys who have served in leadership positions in bar organizations may make good candidates for judge. This is a qualification that could be made known if the candidate were screened. Screening also reveals characteristics of fairness, compassion, humility, absence of vindictiveness, and one who is not easily swayed by public opinion. The robe that judges put on is a symbol. It tells all who approach that the judge will administer justice fairly and equitably, that they will protect and defend the constitutions of Texas and of the United States. Screening would reveal candidates who are respectful of all the people that appear before them, whether as attorneys or as self-represented litigants. It would reveal biases or prejudices that would disqualify them. Patience, kindness, firmness required to administer justice could all be discovered beforehand. It would be helpful to eliminate those candidates who had not had extensive legal experience and cannot empathize with either the attorney who appears in court or the client who has expended great resources just to be in court that day. Such a client would feel shortchanged when they didn't even get to see a judge. There are character traits that the electorate may not even become aware of that careful screening would also reveal. Maybe the motivation for running for judge by a person is the salary and benefits that it provides, or the prestige it brings, or the desire for power. Maybe they think that as a judge, they will not be accountable for the time they spend during the day on matters other than court business. There are judges who, after a short time on the bench, suddenly forget who they are or whom they serve, and they become afflicted with what we know to be black robe disease. That is, their pride causes them to assume an air and arrogance that is off-putting and unprofessional. Such an attitude is not conducive to justice, and in fact clouds the judgment of the court to such an event that justice, if provided at all, is more the result of blind luck than anything else. When a person applies for an appointment to a vacant bench, that person has to complete an extensive application and questionnaire and submit to a background check by the DPS. That person is also required to submit references and appear for in-person interviews by the governor's representative before being appointed. On the contrary, those that choose to sit for election can do so without all of the red tape that an appointee has to go through. That red tape might actually provide the public with a judge who is better qualified to sit than the judge-elect who had no screening except to meet the most basic of requirements. Finally, making the judiciary nonpartisan would give the public a greater sense of confidence and trust, knowing that the judge would be impartial and did not have to fundraise from the very lawyers that appear before the court. These are just some of the reasons that candidates for trial judge should be subjected to a requirement for greater experience in the practice of law, as well as background screening, checks, and references. A plan that allows a bipartisan panel to give a candidate a thumbs up or thumbs down rating prior to appointment, and then that individual standing for retention election would address many of the current problems we have in the Texas judiciary. I'm asking this commission to advocate for such a change in how we choose our judges in Texas. And no, I'm not interested in running again for the bench. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge. Members of the commission, questions?
I hope that means I did good.
It looks like you've convinced everyone, Judge.
Thank you. Okay, well,
Thank
we
you
can
so
adjourn
much.
now.
Thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much
Thank
for
you.
sharing your time with us and your thoughts.
Thank you all for listening.
Judge Patricia O'Connell Alvarez.
Good afternoon, members of the commission. My name is Patricia Alvarez. I'm currently serving my second term as a justice of the Fourth Court of Appeals. My opinions today, of course, are personal and are based on my experience running for judicial office in a district.
Judge, could you speak up just a little bit more?
Yes, I certainly can. Let me put there we go. Can you
Very
hear me?
good. Thank you.
Okay. I was saying that my opinions today are personal in nature and are based on my experience in running a judicial office in 32 counties. I am not here to endorse a particular system of judicial selection. I am here only today to point out how our current system undermines the public's confidence in the judiciary, puts judges in quid pro quo situations, and promotes tribal loyalty over impartial judicial service. In the 5 minutes I have, I will address two inherent flaws I experience with our present system. One of them is partisan elections of judges, and the second one is campaign contributions. Let's start with partisan elections. As judges, our ethic rules require us to be independent, integral, and impartial. But the current system of partisan election forces us into the political arena to seek a judgeship. This is a problematic contradiction, if you ask me. Canon 1 of the Code of Judicial Conduct requires us to be an independent and honorable judiciary, and to make certain that we preserve the integrity and independence of the judiciary. Canon 2 requires us to act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. It also mandates judges to avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all our activities. I underline all our activities, and not allow any relationship to influence our judicial conduct or judgment, or allow the prestige of judicial office to advance the interest of others. In my mind, the practical implication of a partisan election or selection process is very simple. Once the political element is brought into the equation and a judge is identified with a party or a political ideology, the appearance of impropriety and partiality is evident. And the judge's job of promoting confidence in the judiciary is diluted. If you survey the public, you will find that most question why judges have to run in a partisan election. Should judges be political? Can a judge be impartial if he or she favors a political party? What about impartiality if a person is appointed by a Democratic or Republican governor? Will that person be loyal to the governor's party or to the party itself? Will the judge bear the label of a political person. Well, similar questions have been posed to me by the public while I campaigned for office. And the bottom line, in my experience, the public wants a judge with no political ties, someone who is neutral. And by the way, I agree with this. A judge should be a judge, not a man, not a woman, not blue, not red, not white, not Catholic, not Protestant, tall or short. It's very simple, members of the commission. A judge should be highly qualified legal scholar, and the gatekeeper of the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. Let's talk about campaign funding. As you all know, a person running for a judge's position raises money mostly through attorneys, industry people, and friends and family, or puts a lot of his money into the campaign. Well, raising money is a difficult and very distasteful task. You know, begging without being pushy, waiting for a call back that may never come, calling 20 people and only to receive one donation and being rejected. The inescapable consequences of asking for money are far more insidious than just being personally demeaning to the candidate. They affect the public's confidence on the impartiality of the judiciary and the integrity of our legal system. Do we buy justice through donations? We favor one person over another because of donations? And during my campaigns, I regrettably learned that people don't trust us when we're financed by attorneys, corporations, or businesses. The independence and fairness of the judiciary is affected. How does the public perceive a judge who, although he or she follows the law, rules in favor of a big donor? As judges, do we give more attention to the cases involving those who made campaign contributions? What about recusals? You know, the Rule of Civil Procedure 18B states that a judge must recuse himself or herself in a proceeding in which the judge's impartiality might reasonably be questioned. The Attorney General's opinions are clear that we don't have to recuse ourselves due to a campaign contribution. Yet, I go back to the canons. Canon 2 of our Code of Judicial Conduct mandates judges to avoid the impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all our activities, and not to allow any relationship to influence our judicial conduct or judgment. I dare any person who has served as a judge to say that they can be totally fair and independent and impartial when a cause involving a campaign donor is before them. I've recused myself many times during the last campaign, and when I felt that a campaign contribution would be perceived by the public as improper. Yet in determining whether I should recuse myself, my attention shifted away from my work. It also disrupted the court system. If I recused myself, the clerk of the court had to shift the cases around so that I would get a case that I did not feel that I had a conflict with. So is recusal practical? Well, in our court, there were 5 judges running for office at the same time, the same period. It was chaotic, with each of us recusing ourselves because of campaign contributions. In conclusion, the 2 inherent flaws that I described are not serving Texans. The public's perception of quid pro quo does not preserve the integrity, independence, and impartiality of the judicial system. It kills it. I have faith that this commission will consider a system that removes or mitigates these 2 flaws. I ask you to please develop a system that would allow us as judges to remove ourselves from the political arena and continue our task as gatekeepers of the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. Whatever system that is, it will be up to you, but the political aspect and the money has to disappear. I thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Judge. Any questions by any members of the commission? Oh, yes, Judge Phillips.
Justice Alvarez, you've made as compelling a case against our current system as I believe I've ever heard, and I've been interested in the issue for 40 years. But I think your testimony has been a little incomplete by saying it's up to us to decide how to fix this. And do you have any notions, apart from a perfectly devised competitive legal knowledge and psychological exam, or drawing judges by luck, as I think they did in Rhode Island in the colonial days? Surely you have some notion about how to mitigate or eliminate these problems that you very cogently identified.
The mitigation, I think you can't eliminate it. It's political. The mitigation, nonpartisan elections would be my preference. The money issue is big on my plate. I am very much against the funding a campaign. And the reason that we have to do it, like many of the judges advised you, is because we can't possibly cover 32 counties with limited resources. It costs a lot of money, as you know, Chief Justice Phillips. Some alternative, I don't know, maybe more limited campaign, limiting campaign contributions. I don't know. I think that's really up to you to come with some combination that will minimize the political aspect and minimize the fact that we have to go out and seek money from people who are before us.
Well, we've heard testimony that nonpartisan elections are less likely to draw opposition, perhaps, particularly once a judge has already been elected, than a partisan election. But that if you do draw an opponent, they're more expensive because you start off with a base of maybe your vote and your family, if you're lucky. Whereas in a partisan election, there are going to be many hundreds of thousands of people who are for you. And in fact, meeting them would only make them less likely to vote for you. So it's somewhat in tension, the ideas you throw forth, and I'm sure you know that. We're just struggling for how do we minimize all of these problems.
How do you minimize it? There can be all sorts of combinations with the financing part. Limit the contributions from law firms, limit the contributions from attorneys. Maybe if any, the business also. And Damon Garza just told you, hey, if we don't give, if the plaintiffs don't give, the businesses will give. That all stinks, Justice. It all stinks. And it doesn't help us in our perception, the public perception of the judiciary. Yes, I can tell you, I will always have integrity. I will always be independent, Justice. But what about the public? We're forgetting the public. And the public means a lot because we have to make sure that the public has confidence in our system. And we're not doing that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Babcock, I think you had a question.
I do. Justice Alvarez, thank you so much for your very thoughtful remarks. On the issue of limiting the money that lawyers or industries that appear before the courts all the time, have you done any research, or are you aware of any research into the First Amendment implications of limiting? I mean, apparently we just heard about the bar that said, don't let any lawyers or law firms contribute to judicial campaigns, which would solve one problem. It may create another. Are you aware of any research on that issue?
Yeah, there is a Supreme Court opinion that, and I can't remember the name. I'd be glad to send you the citation that does affect the contributions, limiting the contributions from to campaigns.
Okay. Well, if you could shoot it to maybe Megan or me, that'd be great. We'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions by members of the commission? If not, Judge, thank you so much for taking your time and providing a lot of thought-provoking comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to leave and I wish you luck. Thank you.
Okay. All right, next is Judge Rebecca Martinez. Judge Martinez?
Yes, how are you?
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I echo my colleagues' sentiment that our words here offered and our testimony offered here is our own and not a comment on behalf of our sisters on the court. I am Justice Rebecca Martinez. I was elected to the Fourth Court of Appeals in 2012. I'm also the Democratic nominee on the 2020 ballot for Chief Justice to succeed our current Chief Justice, who will retire at the end of her current elected term. I've seen it all. The Fourth Court of Appeals District is the largest appellate district in Texas. As a public member of this committee mentioned, appellate judges are like teachers. I grade the papers of all the trial judges in 32 counties in South Texas. Within my judicial district includes 19 House districts, 9 state senatorial districts, and 8 US congressional districts. I can refute any assumption held by anyone, at least about my judicial appellate district, that partisan elections are guided by top of the ticket dynamics that cause down ballot partisan quote sweeps. Instead, the demographics of each unique county, the contested races down ballot and immediately above my slot on the ballot, the campaign activity conducted by these contested candidates, and the ballot share offered by each county, not to mention the level of voter apathy that varies between gubernatorial and presidential election years. These better explain the results of judicial elections, at least in my district, and very likely in other parts of Texas. Allow me to supplement the testimony of Chief Justice Dori Contreras, offered about the history of Texas's unique judicial selection system. The sixth and current version of our Texas Constitution is the product of thoughtful consideration of several important decisions concerning the judiciary that Texans have grappled with since the middle of the 19th century. Readers and editors of newspapers across the state debated, as you do now, and without true public debate, whether the electorate can be trusted to select their judges. Above all, a shared value was reached. Trust the people in the selection of their servants, and let Caesar with his minions ever again lord it over once a free people. During both eras of an appointed system and after Reconstruction in particular, when an enormous backlog of cases developed at the Supreme Court, lawyers and judges, men like some of you, debated whether all appeals had to be heard. Another shared view developed. Limiting the right to appeal is simply the denial of justice. Our Texas Constitution now reflects centuries of thoughtful debate and enshrines our shared values that every Texan is guaranteed the fair and equal access to our courts, the right of appeal, and the right to elect and remove its judges through election, a system that history has proven to be tested to best achieve those values. So many citizens of San Antonio have fought to increase the opportunities for generations to come. As Senator Chuy Hinojosa recognized, my old friend from the Rio Grande Valley, a Republican governor recognized that the increased number of registered Hispanics organized by Willie Velasquez formed a voting bloc without which he could not win election. I am the product of so many: Willie, Dolores Huerta, Sandra Day O'Connor. And our beloved Justice Ginsburg, who fought and continues to fight past 2020. I'm told I was the first Mexican American to graduate from Boston University School of Law, where I now serve on the Dean's Advisory Board. I've served for many firsts: the first Hispanic federal magistrate judge in the 80s, the first and second Hispanic appellate justices appointed to the 13th Court of Appeals by then Governor Ann Richards. I also serve on the board and faculty of the University of Texas LBJ School of Public Policy's new Women's Campaign School, a bipartisan cohort of women whose resumes rather would make anyone here feel so unaccomplished. Democratic and Republican women from across the state and some outside of Texas who are more prepared to enter the political arena as astute candidates and political operatives, indoctrinated to work together towards shared values and the common good. They are the women of color who aspire to lead and serve, motivated now more than ever that institutions like government, particularly the judiciary, are increasingly diverse in gender and race, and yet inherently challenged by unconscious and conscious bias and outdated assumptions about the role of women and minorities of every color. We are on the advent of a time when firsts are succeeded by seconds like me, and thirds and fourths. And while it results in unfamiliar complexions on the bench, any outdated assumptions about women, and particularly women of color, will blind you, the members of this commission, from the implicit bias that exists in conclusions about the increasing number of Black and brown faces like mine, who now appear behind the bench, and on hundreds, if not thousands, of court hearings now being conducted on this virtual platform. Our focus before the next legislative session will be to improve access to justice in a post-pandemic world. As a member of the judicial section of the State Bar of Texas, I ask you to support these efforts. Judges don't need protection, and it would be a sign of overt bias and discrimination to prioritize the protection of gubernatorial nominees over the constitutional protections that Texans have fought to preserve, to elect and remove every public servant across all three equal branches of government. Do not ignore a lawyer's conscious choice to enter a judicial race in whatever demographic, or to apply for a gubernatorial appointment, and the conscious choice by the governor to appoint lawyers who choose to stand for election as the presumptive Republican nominee in whatever demographic they choose. Choices are purposeful, and those who choose also choose to be held accountable. Choices are sometimes often intentional and without accountability, much like the choice to retire on a date that would certainly delay an appointed successor's obligation to stand for election after their appointment, in spite of the constitutional mandate requiring it. An election is the product of many, many variables, not the least of which is the deliberate choice of a lawyer to leave private life to become a judge. Do not ignore the evidence that should be most instructive to this commission, presented by the inherent stakeholders within the judicial system, the sitting judges and lawyers who uncontrovertibly prefer a system of election over an appointed retention system, and members of the interested public who, as David Slayton and the Judicial Council represented before, are, quote, not convinced that the current system is not the best system. If there is a disfavor against the current system, which results in almost certain removal of a Republican appointee at a subsequent election in a blue county, there should be equal disfavor to the same system that allows for the election in the same general election of an appointee to an equally certain election and likely re-election without a viable threat of contest in the general election. Anecdotal evidence of judicial appointees who choose as a Republican in demographics where their risk of removal is high selectively ignores more complete objective evidence of an appointment system in this state that in theory might meet the shared values of attracting and retaining a diverse and quote qualified judiciary. History and data, relevant and objectively presented data, may not evidence a practice of making political appointments that historically do not appear to value merit over the political designation of the applicant and their willingness to campaign in a certain demographic. I would venture to say that in comparison, applications for an appointment in a red county or statewide are higher in number than for vacancies in a blue county or in an appellate district with demographics mirroring the 13th Court of Appeals. If I were a member of this commission, not only would I add the perspective of a female and democratically elected sitting appellate justice, I would ask to review and conduct a comparative analysis of data that reflects the quote qualifications, as this commission has attempted to define, of appointees or incumbents who prevail and or fall at a general election in both a presidential and gubernatorial cycle within every appellate judicial district across the state, and not simply look to the recent past. In 2018, the results of the most recent gubernatorial cycle in the 4th and the 13th judicial appellate districts, which ironically are the two demographics this committee has chosen to solicit public comment from a very narrow cast net.
Yeah,
I
Justice
believe a
Martinez,
fair and accurate
Justice
assessment
Martinez,
and
I'm
perception.
gonna have to interrupt at this point. We've got so many more people to hear from. A lot of the data that you mentioned, we are trying to pull together. So you are absolutely right about that. And we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but trying to gain access to the data you mentioned is certainly one of the things that is on our list. So I want to make.
Well, if I may, I would like to ask you to not compare apples to oranges. Over the 45 states with intermediate appellate courts, like Texas, less than half, 21, use nominating committees. Only 6 use an appointment system. 12 conduct nonpartisan elections, and 6, including Texas, use partisan elections. So if you want to look at a state that is much like the demographics of Texas, California being the closest, which has more of a quasi-hybrid situation, I'll alert you to what I was informed of a friend and newly appointed judge in California, who disclosed to me that while she has never asked for a campaign donation from lawyers, judges form their own collective PAC, or political action committee, to support each other. She is allowed to endorse other judges. They do try to avoid donations, but 100% of their judicial campaigns are audited. And I'll also alert to you that any concerns that you have about bad judges and how we remove bad judges, it would ignore the Texas Ethics Commission. Chief Justice Nathan Hecht appointed me to preside over special courts of review, where I hear the appeals of sanctioned judges by this Texas Ethics Commission. We have a process to respond to judges who deviate from our code of conduct. Let's not forget that, nor use it as an excuse to change our election system, but use it possibly to guide you in the recommendations on how to elevate the eligibility requirements for a candidate or lawyer to file for judicial office. Thank you.
This PAC, the judicial PAC idea, that's the first time I've heard that. That's an interesting concept and one that we may need to take a good hard look at. But thank you. That's a very unique idea.
Well, it's not a unique idea in the sense that there is one party here that uses PACs to raise money to fund a slate of judicial candidates.
Right.
It not only reduces the transparency of contributions that under our Texas ethics rules are required to be reported and are limited, but it confuses someone like me who want to preserve the judicial independence of judges when the ethics rules are changed in anticipation of a 2020 election with no straight ticket vote. In 2019, last summer, the ethics rules were changed to lift the prohibition of judges to coordinate and campaign together, something that I believe is to then give license to the opportunity for special interest groups and candidates who wish to run on a partisan slate to not to campaign, but also to coordinate their efforts to seek the vote of the electorate. These are things that the commission must be very aware of, because it's the public's observation of these actions by people in power that concern most the public. And again, I appreciate your time.
Okay, any questions by any members of the commission? Any questions at all of Judge Martinez? Judge, thank you so much for your, you've educated us to a very large extent. You've obviously done your homework before you appeared. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Michelle Garcia Shaw.
Hello, thank you very much, Chairman. As you mentioned, my name is Michelle Garcia Shaw. I am not, a fancy title holder, but I am just your average civil litigator with experience in jury trials in Bexar County in both the criminal and civil courts. I have the benefit of following many other people who've testified before the commission today. And I just have to say, I wholeheartedly and 100% agree with former Judge Victor Negron in his opinions and statements concerning the changes that we believe should be made. I have, in my 15 years of practice, seen a number of very good judges on both sides of the ballot lose their positions based on whatever popular voting trend seems to be going on in Bexar County at the time. I think the minimum qualifications for a judicial candidate definitely need to be reviewed and or amended. We seem to be, right now it seems to be the incentive to run for a bench, throw your hat in the ring, see if Lady Luck is on your side in that particular election, versus having the most qualified candidate rise to the forefront. I also do right now practice in the civil court, so the protections against, necessarily the contributions from attorneys and or firms that some of my colleagues have said are afforded to us through the presiding system assumes one thing and omits another. We're assuming that maybe just one donation is being given to any one particular candidate for one particular election. And we're omitting the fact that there is no limit on the number of contributions that can be made. So one firm can contribute to every single judicial candidate on the ballot, incumbent, or, I can't say that many would probably venture to contribute to somebody that's opposing an incumbent, but all contributions can be made. So that's not necessarily the best protection we have. There is another thing that we've probably failed to talk about today, not that it hasn't probably been considered by you all, but there is a distinction that needs to be made between educating the public on the individual versus the candidates. And by that, I mean, it's one thing to go out to, campaign stops or any other kind of a place where you'd get an active audience or a captive audience and talk about your credentials and talk about you as an individual person and educate the the population about what a judge does and what the bench is there for. But it's a very different thing to talk about your temperament, to talk about your experience, to talk about how many juries you've selected, how many trials you've completed, those kinds of things that really matter when you're the arbiter of the law in a case where people's lives are at stake, you know, not just their money, not just their freedom, you know, their whole life is at stake. So I think those things that can be verified by going back to records, going back to pull jury records and or see how many trials this person has completed, those things should be considered and should be probably added to at least a difference in the minimum qualifications for our candidates. Thank you for having me and thank you for all of this consideration.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Any questions of Ms. Shaw? You got off light, Ms. Shaw, no questions.
Thank you
so much for taking your time to appear before us.
Thank you for this consideration.
Okay.
Goodbye.
All right, our next speaker is Judge Stephanie Boyd.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm talking loud enough for everyone. I want to say that first, I appreciate the invitation to be allowed to speak. It's an honor. The time when all the judges were elected this cycle, there began this big whisper campaign about judges not having qualifications. So let me start by saying what my qualifications are for this district court bench. I have a BA, an MBA, a JD. I have a total of over 23 years experience in criminal law, serving as a prosecutor and a defense attorney. I was one of the first attorneys to be appointed to the treatment courts here in Bexar County. I was director of many continuing legal education courses. I'm the person who directed the continuing legal education course that some of you attended. That was over 3 days. It was law in the time of COVID. And that was over 22 hours of CLE. I'm associate professor at UTSA. I teach election law and trial and appellate advocacy. I put on several judicial candidates forum as my time as president of the San Antonio Black Lawyers Association. I'm against any changes to the current selection of judges in Bexar County. Many stated to me when I said I would be speaking at this, they said it's a waste of time. The voters told me that all of this was just a mere formality because decisions had already been made. However, as my departed grandmother told me, you must always speak when given the chance and you must always be counted. So today I want to be counted. Silence is for the timid and the fearful. So no matter the decision to be made here or the decision that may have already been made, I speak. In 2019, I was elected by the voters of Bexar County to the 187th Judicial District Court. I was not funded by the bail bond industry, nor was I funded by the criminal defense bar. I've heard all the speakers, and a lot of the speaking that has been done is as it relates to the civil side. On the criminal side, there is no influx of money. From reviewing many articles and listening to videos of the hearings on this matter, the members and others have made the assumption that voters do not know who they are voting for or are ill-informed or unintelligent. You assume that voters have no idea what judges do. You assume that voters should not be trusted with voting for judges. There is no basis for this assumption. I campaigned. My campaign was meeting the voters. It was listening to voters. You will find that people who voted for me knew me. They knew what I did. I had been in the community many times before. The voters I met knew the office that I was seeking. They knew the type of criminal cases that would be heard in the 187th District Court. They were interested in my qualifications. It was not a mere pulling of a lever without knowledge. The voters knew me. If this body were to remove the power of the voter in selecting judges on our hybrid system or any system, it would result in embedded party bias. This is already evident by judges who have lost elections, but were then appointed as judges. This appointment of judges, intended or not, was along party lines. The voters' decisions and their voices were totally ignored. Individuals lose elections. It is to be accepted and expected. There should not be in place a concerted plan to circumvent a voter selection. What I have heard from voters is that this intention to move the goalposts or change the rules is not because of the way judges are selected, but because of the results. This is already evident. So many judges who are appointed by the governor have lost their elections. I am the only African-American female district court judge in Bexar County. Jim Crow was designed to remove the right to vote from African Americans. For this body to move the goalposts in the way judges are selected would be no different. If this body removes the right of voters to vote and have their voices silenced, this will be a short-term victory, but will result in long-term unintended consequences. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and U.S. Congressman John Lewis were good and faithful servants. I come before you as a good and faithful servant who, in the words of John Lewis, is getting into good trouble. Thank you for your time, and I will accept any questions.
Thank you, Judge. Any questions by any members of the commission? Any questions of Judge Boyd?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Judge Boyd, thank you for your comments. I was startled to hear what you said. I don't dispute it at all, but it was startling to hear that there's not a lot of money spent on the criminal benches.
No, there is not.
Now that you say it, it kind of makes sense to me. But you're right. We've been focusing more on the civil side, and we do have statistics about how much money has been spent. But I bet it's mostly on the civil side.
Yes, a majority of it is on the civil side. And what else I can tell you about my campaign, I would say I may have spent maybe $10,000 on my total campaign. And I've ran in elections before and almost won before. And I've come out of primaries. I'm sorry, is there anything else?
You cut off that
Oh,
was.
I'm sorry, I guess there was a problem. No, I've run in primaries and I've had to work. You know, people shouldn't be work shy. You got to get out and meet the voters. There's over 1 million voters in Bexar County, and I do my best to meet every single one of them.
On the distinction between criminal and civil, is that different, do you think, with the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals and the Texas Supreme Court, and then on the Court of Appeals? Do you think that dichotomy still exists between civil and criminal?
Do you mean in terms of appeals?
Well, just the money. I'm focused on the money. It seems like maybe the Court of Criminal Appeals, they have to raise money to run, but probably not as much as the Supreme Court.
No, I don't believe it does. I haven't done research on that, but when you're dealing with criminal cases, there is very little funding as far as campaign contributions.
Great. And that's the point. Thank you so much, Judge.
Thank you.
Well, Judge, I can see why you win your elections. The question I have is, when you mentioned that you spent about $10,000 on your campaign, was that all your money?
I would say about approximately 8,000 of it was my own money.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Any questions by any members of the commission? All right, I don't see any hands up. Judge, thank you again so much for appearing before us and sharing your thoughts, because we've not had many criminal district judges appear before us. So thank you very much for your input.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. All right, next we have Judge Michael DeLeon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Beck and members of the commission. I'm Judge Michael DeLeon of County Court at Law number 7 here in Bexar County. County Court number 7 is one of 2 misdemeanor courts that deal with cases of domestic violence exclusively. Before I was elected to the bench in November 2018, I was a prosecutor with the Fort Bend County District Attorney's Office for 3 years, and then a prosecutor in my hometown of San Antonio for the next 15 years. I am here today to speak in favor of the election of judges. As a former judicial candidate, I know all too well the challenges of trying to inform an electorate of over 1 million registered voters in our county about my specific qualifications for the bench. Now, I'm sure by this point, the commission does not need an electoral history on Texas that goes back to citizens electing judges since 1876. What I want to convey to the commission is that the appointment of judges by the governor or the governor's select committee does not remove politics out of our system. In fact, it would inject politics due to attorneys seeking appointment to the bench having to have influence with the political party in power. An appointment committee merely removes the voting rights of citizens to determine who will be the judges in their community and places those decisions in the hands of a select few. And those few will be controlled by a political party. Under the current political environment going back to 1994 in Texas, the Republican Party has controlled all statewide offices. If an appointment system was in place during those years, only attorneys who had influence in the Republican Party would ever be considered for judicial appointment. If the Democratic Party was in control, I imagine a similar selection process would occur. A selection committee will inherently be political no matter how bipartisan the committee is. It will lead to there being a grand majority of either Republicans or Democrats placed onto the bench. Now, the demographics in Bexar County show that it's a community of a majority Latino descent. Voters should have the opportunity to elect judicial candidates whom they believe are highly qualified and are reflective of the community as a whole. Someone appearing as a defendant or a complainant in a criminal court should have the faith in the judicial system. Diversity is important in our system of justice, and voters should continue to have the right to determine who will oversee their disputes or charges in civil or criminal courts. If the people believe that judges are just the handpicked allies of the governor and his or her political party, that erodes faith in our judicial system, which is already facing numerous challenges in the area of equality and fairness. The independence of the judiciary relies on the citizens selecting their judges. One of the reforms the legislature has already recently done is to eliminate straight ticket voting. We can only guess as to how the eliminating straight ticket voting will play out in this upcoming presidential election and the non-presidential election years. I believe any effort to reform how we elect or appoint judges needs to be a thoroughly reviewed process and should not be rushed into. In conclusion, if we cannot take the politics out of an appointment system, no matter how bipartisan it is, then it is best to not take away citizens' voting rights and keep that responsibility with the citizens, the voters of Texas. Thank you. And before I stop my remarks, we've been talking a lot about donations, civil versus criminal. Looking at the criminal side of a county court at law race, I formerly as a prosecutor, I ran as a prosecutor for my judicial bench. Don't come from a wealthy family. You know, as a prosecutor, you're a public servant. So I did rely on defense attorneys to, because defense attorneys, frankly, are the only people who care about county court benches. And they're not looking for influence. They're merely looking for competent attorneys to serve as a judge. Typically, defense attorneys just want a judge who will run an efficient court, who will not waste their time because time is money. And when I ran my campaign, I raised about $20,000, all of that from donations and from a few friends here and there. But in my particular situation, if at the county court level, if attorney donations were banned outright, that places people who to basically self-fund their campaign. So you have to be wealthy to fund your campaign, or you have to have wealthy friends or family that you can rely on. And that's problematic for people who are public servants like prosecutors who have a lot of experience in the criminal justice system, and rightfully prosecutors should also, along with defense attorneys, be part of the judiciary at a certain point in their career. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge De Leon. Any questions of the judge by any members of the commission? There being none, thank you so much, Judge, for taking your time to share your thoughts with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, Alex Burnell is our next speaker.
Thank you very much, members of the Texas Commission on Judicial Selection. My name is Alex Brunell. I'm the advocacy manager at Move Texas, and I'd venture to say I might be the youngest person on this call. Move Texas is a grassroots nonpartisan nonprofit here in Texas that builds young Texans' political power through issue advocacy, civic engagement, and leadership development. I am testifying today because chiefly one of the endeavors of our organization is to create a bottom-up civic culture where young voters are brought into civic life on their terms and informed not only about high-profile elections, but the down-ballot races that shape their local lives as well, like those in the judiciary. I mention this because what this committee is intended to explore are the effects of partisan judicial elections, and one of the primary observations made by those who support an alternative selection process is that partisan ID produces cycle-to-cycle volatility in the judicial system because voters vote party. It should be said here that a system of appointments will not eliminate partisanship if it's a party that does the appointing. So claims about lessening partisanship should flow to neither side of this debate if other models simply give it a new shape. What a change from status quo to alternatives being floated certainly means is less democracy. From the point of view of my organization, voting for judges means an opportunity to talk about criminal justice policy often. Questions like who goes to jail and why are questions about things like bail reform, opportunities to think, converse about, and mobilize around critical ethical questions like that at the local level, and immediately intervene if we're on the wrong course is a good thing for instilling the civic spirit of paying attention and participating. Instead of viewing waves of change like the ones that occurred in the Harris County Judiciary in 2018 from the outcomes, view it from the inputs. Massive voter participation. Voters on the ground talking about bail reform. Black women judges who wanted to pursue it. Voters compelled to the ballot box to support these efforts. I think most of the reasons we want to tinker with the system are because we think of low information partisan voters. Move Texas says rather than shift the rules to insulate and correct for this supposed voter volatility problem that we need to manage, instead, we need to connect voters, young voters, to policy efforts at the local level and help them get informed down ballot. The fact that most young voters don't ID by party and that we've done away with straight ticket voting only facilitates this further. Allow organizations like Move Texas to continue building a civic culture where judges don't suffer the supposed political wins because of low expectation judgments of voter behavior. Instead of rule changes, work on creating informed local level voters like we do every day. We're going to go down that ballot by the issues regardless of party. The justifications for alternatives are too frequently based on perceptions of voters needing more top-down management. Implicit in this point of view is an anti-voter attitude that my organization, which works with young people on the ground every day, has to reject. Thank you to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Brunell. Any questions of Mr. Brunell?
I do.
All right, yes.
I've been
Judge-
quiet.
Judge
I've been
Davidson?
quiet for a while. Mr. Brunell, thank you so much for your passionate and articulate comments. Appreciate them a lot. We have discussed a lot on this commission improving voter education as to qualifications to look for in a judicial candidate and to try to communicate those. So you mentioned bail reform. Do you have on your agenda a module that identifies qualifications that would lead to a better judiciary and a way for your young people that you're reaching out to be able to check for that?
Yeah, so in response to that, I would say that frequently we get a response back from judges when we have candidate forums that it's a neutral position, that it's suspended above politics. And so what we instead get is a biography of that judge's judicial history, elements of their character. And I think that there's key components of that education missing for a young voter, right? Understanding how local rules change the nature of a court. So we have all kinds of information that really goes into the mechanics of a court and how that can affect the ways that things are going across the court system as a whole. So I would say that our goal is to inform young voters about the mechanics of the court system rather than get this kind of position where instead we are told by judges that it's sort of suspended from, or should be suspended from politics in ways that other elements of the system are not. Because I definitely think like exploring local rules, things like that, is a way of like showing young voters why this local election really matters and is really critical.
I don't know if you were on the call when Judge Negron testified, but he listed about 15 different attributes that would be helpful for a judge to have. Those are difficult to put on a checklist, but I would encourage you to get a copy of his comments and maybe weave that into your education.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, any other questions by any members of the commission? If not, thank you so much, Mr. Burnell. We appreciate you taking your time to appear before us.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Monica Muniz Sharp. Ms. Sharp.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Monica Muniz Sharp, and I'd like to start off by saying thank you for this opportunity to speak before you today. I was born and raised in San Antonio, and after graduating from Incarnate Word High School, I lived in Austin for 34 years. I earned my BS in mathematics from UT. I spent a few decades as a tech executive at Apple, and after joining an artificial intelligence and machine learning startup, I moved back to San Antonio in January 2019 so I could be closer to my parents. I'm also a real estate investor and owner in San Antonio and in Austin. But most importantly, I am an active and an informed voter and have been since I turned 18. I am here today to ask the commission to protect and maintain my right to vote for judicial candidates. I'm not a fan of the Missouri plan. I'm not a fan of appointments, governor appointments, and I'm certainly not in favor of a small group of people appointed by the governor to make decisions on judicial appointments. I believe that for me, my parents, my neighbors, and future registered voters, we need to maintain the right to vote on and decide who the judges will be in our communities. I do think, however well-intended these conversations on the selection are, moving to a broader appointment process and removing that right from voters is only going to lead to more partisanship. I do think if the commission's end goal is to improve the qualifications of judicial candidates, then I respectfully ask that we look for a more common sense approach and maybe have our Texas legislature look at the qualification criteria for judicial candidates. It has been incredibly helpful hearing testimony from the others before me and the discussion from the commission here. So I would presume that there are courts that would benefit from improvement in qualifications. And I want to make a point of calling out the importance of the word improvement over increasing qualifications, because when you add qualifications, that could unintentionally create bias or barriers to prospective candidates as well. So overall, instead of, oops, I just lost my AirPod, hang on. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So instead of removing Texas citizens' right to vote, instead of rewriting our Texas Constitution, my request of the commission is that we maintain our Texas citizens' right to make the decisions on the judges in our communities. Thank you.
Ms. Sharp, this is David Beck. Let me ask a question. Do you favor partisan elections or nonpartisan elections?
I like the nonpartisan aspect. Certainly, I am not a fan of straight ticket. Nobody, there's no, you're going to get my vote for whatever color or party. I'm not so I'm a fan of nonpartisan. I like the idea of off cycle, but I understand the challenges that raises for the judicial candidates to have people to turn out. I was a voter registrar back when I was living full-time in Travis County and was so excited, but everybody I talked to was registered. The problem was turnout. So yeah, I don't want to create a situation that makes it harder for judicial candidates to have voters show up.
Thank you. Any questions by members of the commission? If not, thank you so much, Ms. Sharp, for taking your time to appear before us. We thank you. All right, our next speaker is Justice Gloria Saldana.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this forum. Basically, I just want to share a few of my ideas that I believe that voter participation strengthens our democracy. I believe that the election process matters. Who is chosen is less important than how they are chosen is less important than who is chosen, I believe. Election of judges has become an integral part of our Texas culture. Texans value their independent nature and would likely not react very favorably to having a choice that has been theirs for successive generations taken away. Voter participation exploded in 2018, and a major increase in voter participation is expected in 2020 despite the pandemic. So it is a slippery slope. Voters have stricter expectations, I believe, than what's going on in our nation. I believe that taking away the citizens' right to decide who will be on the bench concentrates too much power in too small a group. I think that the voters are very well informed when candidates are running for election. There is a great deal of information sharing. The process is to convince the voters that you have the credentials you need, that you have the right values, that you are someone who is independent and will follow the law. And so basically, communication is very important. When I first ran in 2000, I was very well funded, but I did not actually get out and see people. I used the media, radio and television, and I did not win. And actually the fact that I was well funded was used against me. So when I ran again in 2005, I funded my own campaign. I actually borrowed some money to have materials to give out. I went to every event I could. I went to forums, seminars at the Alamo Dome and gave out my cards. People asked me why I wanted to be judge, and I told them why. I believe that I have the right perspective. I believe that justice is very important to our country. It is a very important value that we need to preserve, and I wanted to be a part of that. I believe that being a judge is a public service. I don't believe that it is something that is something to be taken lightly. Quite frankly, when you get elected as a judge the first time, you are not really qualified to be a judge, but the Texas Center for the Judiciary does an amazing job. And they continue to educate us when we first get elected in seminars where they are very comprehensive. They provide us with the materials that we need. We have a bench book for anything we have questions on. We have support in our courts so that anytime we have something that we feel not quite up to, we can get the information. My motto is the more you know. I believe that life is a learning experience. I don't think you ever know enough. And so I think that it's a process of growth, and I'm concerned, quite frankly, that it's a slippery slope. First, we take the right to vote for judges away from the citizens. What's next? Are we going to start having committees to choose our district attorneys, our legislatures? I mean, where will it stop? And so I'm afraid that it's not a good move. I really did not prepare much of a speech for you today. I just wanted to share with you my concern, because I believe that our democracy is based on a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the more we have campaigns, the more people get involved in the civic process. They have a stake in having judges that are going to be empathetic, understand their problems. And as Judge Boyd said, when I ran again in 2012 for the County Court 8, where I presently preside, it is a misdemeanor court. But I feel like I can do a lot of good because people, we are human, we make mistakes. I want the county court misdemeanor to be an opportunity for people to take stock of where they have gone wrong and to rehabilitate and, have a good life and be able to be contributing citizens to our community. I believe that voting is our input to the government that we have is a very important right. And I don't see that it's a very good idea to take that away from the citizens. The citizens have a right to have their voices heard. And I think that in voting, that's exactly what they're doing. And so the process is very, very important. I think that I believe I agree with Judge Boyd that on the criminal side, there is very little role that funding plays. I financed this campaign in 2018 because I believe in the justice system. I believe that there's a lot of good that can come from it. And I know that other judges feel the same way, but I'm not sure that we ever really speak to it. So as far as being the best qualified, that's a process of development, and we have to have certain judicial education credits every year. And I think it's the Center for the Judiciary is amazing. They always present very thought-provoking presentations that have they're very relevant to the things that we hear. I appreciate your listening to my opinion. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Judge, for taking your time to appear before us and sharing your thoughts and sentiments about being a judge. After hearing you explain what it's like to be a judge, I think the lawyers on this commission will take great comfort in that. So thank you. Are there any questions of any members of the commission of the judge? If not, Judge Saldana, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Ted Santos, who's president of the Mexican American Bar Association of San Antonio. Mr. Santos.
Thank you, Chairman Beck and members of the commission for inviting the community to weigh in on this very important issue of our judges. My name is Ted Santos, and I am the president of the Mexican American Bar Association of San Antonio. I am here today speaking to you on behalf of MABA SA and not in a personal role. When the organization learned that your commission invited public testimony on the issue of judicial selection in San Antonio, MABA SA called a special meeting on the topic. As a result of the meeting, our members voted unanimously to have me appear before you today to state MABA's opposition to any kind of potential commission electing and appointing judges rather than Texas voters electing our judges. The Mexican American Bar Association of San Antonio is a diverse, nonpartisan association made up of attorneys who are Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Our members include family and probate lawyers, the plaintiff and defense trial bar, criminal defense lawyers, and members of the district attorney's office. It also includes trial court, appellate, retired, and future judges. We are both a large community and a tight-knit community who are committed to the betterment of San Antonio, the bar, and the judiciary. Our membership has supported and nurtured the advancement of the Mexican American community and all of San Antonio in a number of ways, including bipartisan judicial forums to promote voter awareness. MABA's founding members came together over 40 years ago concerned about the issues of representation, voting rights, and the community's right to select and elect a diverse judiciary to reflect the colors of our community. 40 years is a long time, and our judiciary in Bexar County has finally begun to reflect the diversity of our city. Taking away San Antonio's ability to vote for judges would not ensure a diverse, qualified judiciary reflective of our community and its stakeholders, such as jurors, civil litigants, and the criminally accused. Neither would it ensure accountability, access to justice, or confidence in our justice system. According to the most recent data gathered by the Hispanic National Bar Association, there's a lack of diversity within the federal judicial appointment process. 75% of the current members of the federal judiciary are white. Less than 9% of the current federal judiciary is Latino. And only 2.5% of federal judges are Hispanic women. A commission to appoint judges, rather than having judges voted into office as they are now, would muzzle our community's voices and disenfranchise voters' rights. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. MABA SA has a vital interest and concern for our judiciary and looks forward to the opportunity to assist in any future discussions on areas of concern to this commission. While we are opposed to a potential nominating committee to appoint judges in Texas, our association looks forward to being of service to this commission in any way we can in our mutual pursuit of justice. On behalf of MABA San Antonio, thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. And thank your organization for taking the time to authorize you to come before us and present us with your views. Any questions by members of the commission of Mr. Santos? There being none, you got off light. Thank you so much for taking your time to appear before us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Dr. Ellen Rojas Clark.
Hi.
Dr. Clark.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm a professor emeriti in the Division of Bicultural Bilingual Studies at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and I'm here in my individual capacity as a committed citizen. I have been was at UTSA for 40 years. I'm an academic and a researcher, but also someone who's incredibly interested in working with my community. I have written 6 academic books and 4 books on cultural studies, including tamales. And my next new book is going to be on pan dulce. So all that to say that I know my community and I know the cultural attributes that we have and the resources. So I thank you for the opportunity to represent my perspective of the election of our judges, which needs to be in the hands of Texans. I'm a native Texan, born in San Antonio, and this is where I'm going to die. This is my city, my county, my state, and my country. And that is why I can emphatically state that our judges should be elected by the people they serve. Our constitutional right to vote is why I'm against losing my right to vote or losing the right to vote for my judges. I have voted in every election that I was eligible, and I'm 79 years old, so I've voted a lot of times, and I'm very cognizant of learning about a candidate's qualifications. Our judges need to reflect our community's diversity. We need to represent all participants in our cities and counties. Just recently, I organized a 1,000 voting brigade that has participants throughout the state of Texas. Our mission is to increase voter participation in all elections. Our objectives are to learn and teach our communities how to be prepared to vote in all elections. That means, besides getting people to register to vote, learn how to read the ballots, They need to learn about each and every candidate and the offices they're running for. In other words, our communities will be prepared to vote for qualified candidates. All of us are responsible citizens who will do everything to ensure our right to elect judges and to elect qualified judges and local officials. So that right needs to be protected. We operate now with the system of appointed court judges, federal judges, and Supreme Court judges who then serve for life. Our constitutional right to vote, and in this case, to elect our judges in Texas, usually on a term basis, gives us that voice to balance the judicial system. Taking the right of Texans, or my right, to vote for judges is a form of voter suppression. So to set up a state commission to appoint judges then becomes a partisan issue. If appointed by whoever holds the office as governor, I am opposed to this initiative. So I think we need to maintain our right, and I thank you again for the opportunity to be heard on this very important issue to a voting public who is eager to learn about all the offices and all the candidates that they can vote for. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Any questions by any members of the commission of Dr. Clark? If not, thank you so very much for taking your time to share your thoughts with us. We appreciate it.
Bye.
All right, our next speaker is Peter Velasilo. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
He's here. We're just asking him to unmute right and his audio and video. I'm not sure if he's having technical difficulties, so let's move on to the next one.
All right,
and I can work with
let's
him.
move on to Judge Catherine Torres Stahl. Judge Stahl.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Beck and members of the commission. I appreciate the opportunity to address you today regarding the study on proposed judicial selection. By way of introduction, please allow me to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a current sitting criminal district court judge in Bexar County who presides over very serious felony cases to include capital murders and additionally over a specialty court called Esperanza Court that is a governor mandated prostitution prevention court. This is my second term as a district court judge, and I am currently running unopposed in this election cycle. I have previously served as a district court judge for one term where I lost my bid for re-election. Simultaneous with my run for re-election in 2009, I was being considered for a federal bench in the Western District of San Antonio. My judicial career began as a municipal court judge where I sat for 10 years, and my legal career began as an assistant district attorney. I have now been licensed for 26 years in between judicial terms. I practice as a criminal defense attorney and also served as the deputy director and general counsel for the adult probation department. I do not run just to run. I would like it to be noted, I run to fill a need and serve my community. I've sat on multiple boards and commissions across our community, and I also have taught at the undergraduate level and currently teach at the law school. It has been my desire to discuss the election of judges at a change in the system. It is not my belief that judicial selection would be a better system. In fact, what is really needed is for us to tweak the current system we have in place. I strongly believe we should be elected by members of our community who in turn hold us accountable. Abolishing elections and putting in place a more flawed system of appointment will not bring good change to the benches of the great state of Texas. I sat on a national board and co-chaired the Judicial Council for 10 years for the Hispanic National Bar Association and sat next to judges from all over the country. I will admit that at times they were shocked by our system and at other times wish they had more diversity in their own state to compare to ours. With that said, I do not believe our Texas residents would appreciate losing their right to vote for their judges. What we do need in our election systems is to enhance our experience requirements. Clearly, 4 years experience is not necessarily sufficient for a district court bench, and they should be adjusted accordingly based on the actual court. Our terms are equally challenging, as 2 years into our terms, we are campaigning again. So 4-year terms are not necessarily a good length of term. For example, other states have 6 to 12-year terms. But to throw out a system that only needs tweaking for a whole new system that may bring greater challenges like increased politics and lack of diversity is not the answer. I would like to highlight my experience with the federal appointment process as guidance. In 2009, the discussion was that the Western District of San Antonio wanted a woman to fill Judge Ferguson's seat. I, like many other qualified women attorneys and judges, submitted our names for consideration. I happened to be the first one out of the chute, selected by the White House to start the process. I met with senators and attended the bipartisan committee interview, and the bipartisan committee was made up of 23 members, 19 Republicans and 4 Democrats, predominantly males. The process was flawed from the beginning. But please don't be confused. The story is not about me. It is about the process. There must have been 20 plus women and men who were very qualified in that group that followed as well. In a span from 2009 to 2015, 6 years later, an Anglo male from Austin was appointed. Very qualified, I might add, but I question why the original female judge discussed was not found in San Antonio in 6 years. To this day, we do not have a woman of color or a woman, period, sitting in the Western District of San Antonio. This appointment system felt more political to any election system that I've participated in, and I've participated in 4 now. This, as noted by Senator Hinojosa, this nonpartisan appointment system is fraught with politics, partisanship, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. We have to ask, would a state selection committee be any less biased or limiting in its appointments? As a woman of color who graduated from Fox Tech High School, attended St. Mary's University and its law school, and grew up in an inner city neighborhood raised by a single mother who had a 6th grade education, I have had the opportunity to run for judge and sit in a community that looks like me. I have worked hard to achieve in my legal career to help my community, who has given me much. I have mentored many, including starting a teen court at municipal court that ran for years, and I know I can claim at least 6 of my participants who are now practicing attorneys themselves and hopefully have the opportunity to be judges themselves one day. I do not believe that I would have had this opportunity with an appointment process. I would like to address the financial funding issue. I am a criminal district court judge, and like Judge Boyd, financing is not really something that comes easily. I'd also like to address the fact that the bail bond companies, unfortunately, I must be doing something wrong because I think I've received $5,000 from them, and that's not a whole lot of money. But I think that sometimes the issue also with an appointment process takes us back to the legacies who are able to run on a name and finances. Without that background, which I clearly do not have, I would not have been able to run and win my election. I would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak today and hope that you will consider this as a cautionary tale. A selection committee could be very limiting in its ability to keep our judiciary diverse and relevant to this community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Justice Torres Stahl. Any questions by any members of the commission? Yes, Commissioner Babcock.
Yeah, Judge, thank you for appearing with us. You said that you lost an election. To what do you attribute that? Judge Spiedland Gonzalez said it was apathy. Was that the result in your case?
Well, I can tell you specifically that's probably part of the issue. That was the period of time when I was being considered for the federal bench. And the reason that I drew an opponent at that time was because they were sure I was going to get appointed. And so that is the only reason I drew an opponent, because that specific opponent actually switched between 2 different candidates in that space of time. I can also tell you that during that election cycle, I lost by less than 7,600 votes, and only 2 other candidates came close to those numbers, and everybody else running that election cycle on the party platform lost by 15,000 and 20,000 votes. So that tells me that I had the votes. I obviously was drawing bipartisan support. And unfortunately, I was not able to pull it off, but that was the state of that.
But you don't think it was a partisan swing in your instance in any event?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, I'm sure that they do happen. I can't deny that that happens at times. But I think in that particular, if you use those numbers and you look at that, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions by members of the commission? If not, Justice Terrestall, thank you so much for taking your time to appear before us and sharing your thoughts with us. We thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, next is Majoli Garcia. I hope I'm pronouncing that first name correctly.
Hi there. My name is Magoli Garcia.
Did I mispronounce your name? I'm sorry if I did.
No worries. Thank you. So good afternoon. First, I'd like to take the time to say thank you for your patience and for taking the time to listen to our testimonies. Your time is greatly appreciated here today. A man without a vote is a man without protection. Voting is the most important and powerful instrument ever devised by man for breaking down injustice and the walls that imprison men because they are different from other men. LBJ. As you know, my name is Magoli Garcia. I turned 18 this year and I am a political science major. This election in November will be my very first presidential election, but the presidential election is not the only election I have to look forward to. I'm here to oppose the prospect of losing our vote to right to a committee that will select judges for us, Texan voters. The argument that continues to be brought up is that our voters are uninformed and electing those that aren't qualified to be judges. And I object. Yes, of course we need qualified judges to serve our courts, but that can only and should be determined by our community. The whole concept of our democracy that the framers left us with was the untouched right to a direct election of our government. Because our democracy thrives on voter engagement. The ability to elect one of our peers to represent our community is a powerful thing to have access to. Therefore, I challenge you to make more representation, not less. You need to double down and get people to vote rather than driving them away. Secondly, if you assume voters are uninformed, don't strip them of their constitutional right to vote, give them the correct resources to be educated and informed. As a first-time voter, I was looking forward to voting on a multitude of levels, national to local, including our judges. I was also looking forward to voting for someone whom I know would represent my community as it continues to grow and diversify not only in opinion, but culture, ethnicity, and race. A committee appointing judges to our communities is not true representation of the people, and it is imperative that those judges come from our own community, whom we choose because we need to be able to trust them. Their judgment shouldn't be coming from an outside group of professionals. My generation and future ones not only deserve, but the bare minimum is to directly vote for judges. As a political science major, I say it's a conflict of interest to give the powers to be a delegated, not elected committee to appoint the judges in our communities. To that end, today also happens to be National Voter Registration Day. Please do not let us, your voters, your constituents, down by stripping us of our constitutional right to vote in order to create a committee to appoint judges. Like LBJ said, a man without a vote is a man without protection. Allow for voters to continue to protect themselves and our communities by protecting our vote. Again, my name is Magoli Garcia. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Garcia. Any questions by any members of the commission? All right, I don't see any raise of hands. You got off light.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you for appearing before us.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Christina Marie Ramirez Romo.
Oops.
Ms. Ramirez Romo?
I'm here. I'm trying to get on. Let's see. Am I on?
Okay,
There I
there
am.
we go. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to be here in this space. My name is Christina Ramirez Romo. I go by the name of Tina, and I'm a licensed Texas teacher, secondary ed teacher for the past 33 years, and an active voter for 41 years. This very right that those who came before me fought for is one that cannot be taken away. I'm against losing my constitutional right to vote for my judges in the community I was born and raised in, and as an educator, one that I have committed to serve in for a lifetime. I believe the electorate must decide on who will serve best as our local judges. Having the committee appoint judges takes our right to vote on what affects our community. Judges should be voted into office because it allows the local courts to reflect the views of the people. For that reason, we voters educate ourselves to ensure we remain informed in order to have a strong judicial system that will serve the people. So voters must decide, and we are educated enough to make informed decisions by researching what cases they worked on before running for judgeship, and records of dealing fairly with people of all backgrounds. Even though we live in hyper-partisan times, the consensus of our diverse community, especially here in San Antonio, is to vote fair and balanced judges into our local courts. The benefits of the voters electing judges is giving the public more of a vested interest. And if there is an interest, you have more of a respect for the justice system. In the words of David Brody, a criminal justice professor at Washington State, who studied judicial elections, stated, "If we lose respect for the court, it's a major blow to the community." And in today's hearing, there is the word resonated, the word community has been repeated. I love what Judge Boyd stated that community has to have confidence in the system. I totally agree with that statement. So taking away the right of Texans to vote for judges and forming a committee to appoint judges takes away our voice and our birthright to fight for our democratic right that calls us to protect, defend, and practice. I firmly stand against a committee to decide for the people, and I hold fast tenaciously to the sacred and vital famous address of the people, by the people, for the people. So with that being said, I have more faith in voters' choices than in the choice of politicians. Thank you for listening to my voice today.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Ramirez Romo. Any members of the commission have any questions? All right, there being none, thank you so much for taking your time to appear before us and sharing your views with us.
Yes, thank you for letting me voice my opinion.
Okay. Our next speaker is Deborah Ponce Hernandez.
Yes, thank you so much. Hello, and thank you also for allowing me to speak today. I appreciate this opportunity very much. My name is Deborah Ponce Hernandez, and I have lived in San Antonio for well over 40 years. I know that each year I take the time to learn about the judges that are up for election. I read each year which candidate is available. I go to the meetings where they are speaking and learn about the extracurricular work they do for the city. As a woman of color who's lived on the South Side her entire life, I have become a South Side advocate for the underserved people in my city. And so for me, learning about what they do extracurricular activities that they do is very important to me, because if they are learning about the people that they serve, that to me speaks volumes, in addition to all of the qualifications that they have. I've also have come to realize that everyone's right to vote must be protected, even if it seems insignificant to some people here. I don't feel like people of different education levels or experiences are, their vote should be less to anybody. And and that's something to really think about, all of you that are making these decisions today. I will state early in my comments, obviously from what I've already said, that I do support our constitutional right to vote for judges in Texas. The reason that I support the vote for judges is because I believe in our system of checks and balances as well. There should never be a time when Democrats are in control, nor all Republicans are in control. I especially believe in the people's voice must never be eliminated. If our Texas democracy is handed over to appointed judges, there will be no accountability. Judges will become controlled by those who appointed them into those positions, and they will become beholden to them. Their very decision for certain cases can be marred by that support. And that's very dangerous, especially in our state that hasn't had that track record. Right now, it is Republicans who could be choosing, but with new elections, it could change and become all Democrats. My point is that appointments will always be tainted by party. The people voting eliminates this. People who vote for judges will then hold them accountable, and this keeps everyone honest. I promise you that people like me who read about judges and hear their promises at community meetings, and then these judges do not do what they promised, we do hold them accountable, and we will ask them questions, we'll send them emails. So, eliminating that check and balance is very dangerous. If the commission appoints, there will always be suspicion of every judge appointed, the people. And that's very important for us to remember. The people will lose faith in the justice system because judges' decisions will always feel bought and paid for. Currently, with every year that passes in Texas, more and more people are excluded from voting. Recently, Texas polls have closed. Texas, everybody sees it. We have the most lopsided gerrymandered districts compared to any other state. Texas currently has a reputation for being racist and discriminatory. And appointing will only add to this reputation. And I, because of this, am asking you to vote against appointments and provide us a better system, or the same system in Texas. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. First, I want to applaud you for taking the time to learn about judges. I wish more and more people would do that. Any questions by any members of the commission? All right, if not, thank you so much, Ms. Hernandez, for taking your time to share with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think the last person to appear before us at our public hearing in San Antonio is Rebecca Flores. Ms. Flores?
Yes, I'm here. Do you want my picture up there or not?
It's up to you.
Well, let me put it on. Okay, I think it's on. My name is Rebecca Flores, and I live here in San Antonio. I've lived here off and on most of my life. I support our constitutional right to vote for our judges in the state of Texas. It gives me, I'm a 77-year-old citizen on a very limited income, a voice in the selection and retention of judges. This is what a democracy looks like, and we hear that refrain now more and more often. We must retain the attachment of the people of the state to each judge we elect, because we have to trust that they will be reflective of our communities. When I cast a ballot, I expect my votes to matter in choosing representatives who are responsive to me and accountable to the communities they represent. The remedy to bad judges is the election process every 4 years. Not one study has shown that appointed judges are better than elected judges. Appointment of judges by a commission and ultimately by the governor does not remove partisan politics nor patronage out of the picture, because whether the governor is a Republican or a Democrat, access to the ears of these individuals is available to only those big donors who can recommend and then sway a governor's choices. These appointed judges would be less likely to go against the hand that feeds them. They become cronies of the powerful who bend to the will of the rich. This commission was established by a law that was legislated in the 2019 legislative year. a year that saw Republicans with a majority both in the House and the Senate and the entire statewide leadership. I believe that it was hatched up because of the Democratic sweep of the judicial bench in Houston. The devil is always in the details, and who decides what these details are? Who will nominate individuals to the Judiciary Commission? Who will be selected to be on this commission? Will I have a say in who is on the commission? Will I have to rely on the governor to listen to my recommendations? I think not. The state of Texas, throughout my history, starting in 1943 when I was born, have excluded thousands of us from voting through different guises. And this is the latest ruse trying to be placed on us. The first one I remember is the poll tax that excluded poor folks like my father and mother from voting. Each election cycle, thousands of Texans are prevented from voting due to barriers in the voter registration process, the restrictions on casting ballots, and then discriminatory and partisan rigged district maps. These barriers today include, but are not limited to voter registration, voter purges, strict voter ID requirements, voter confusion, voter intimidation and harassment, poll closures and long lines, malfunctioning voting equipment, disenfranchisement of justice-involved individuals, and gerrymandering. I am against any further disenfranchisement in the state of Texas, since enough disenfranchisement has already been done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Flores. Any questions by any members of the commission before we release Ms. Flores? If not, thank you so very much for taking your time to appear before us and share your views.
Absolutely, it's our right and our duty to respond to these commissions. I want to add just one other thing. I was doing voter registration in the South Side San Antonio on South Flores Sunday, and I visited and I met up with a lot of ex-felons who told me very, very sure of themselves that they were not going to be allowed to vote, that they had been told that they would never vote again once they were out of prison and had done all their paperwork. It took me a long time to convince them that information was wrong. But that is another group of disenfranchised people. There's millions, you know, and I know, there are millions of people of color in prisons. As they come out, they are somehow, somebody is telling them that they cannot vote. And that is a great disservice to those men and women who have already paid their debts and are trying to live a free life in this community.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Any questions by any members of the commission? Thank you very much, Ms. Flores, for taking your time to appear.
You're welcome.
Us. Thank you. Well, our public hearing lasted appreciably longer than the last one we had, and I want to thank all the members of the commission for staying with us. We had a record 24 people line up to speak, which I think is a testament to the interest on this issue, certainly in San Antonio.
Mr. Chairman.
Before we adjourn, I want to especially thank Representative Menjeras for all the help that she gave us and helping us organize this public hearing, and her staff for helping us. So thank you very much, Representative Menjeras, for all the help that you gave us. And you really turned the people out. So thank you so much. Judge Jameson.
Speaker along the way, and I didn't know if that person ever got back in line.
No. There was one person said they were going to submit written comments, and then one person never got back in line, at least to my knowledge, or Megan's knowledge.
Right, we've messaged Peter and have not gotten any response.
Well, if there's nothing else to come before the group, I'm ready to adjourn. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring up? If not, thank you all so much and have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.